Hey, boys and girls. Marshall Harris here in the rabbit hole with Nathan Ruff. And today I'm going to teach you the lesson of why you shouldn't take life so serious. As a former professional athlete, played with the NFL, and as a marketing and advertising executive, and currently as a practicing artist in studio practice, there are lots of life lessons to learn. But probably the most important one was my front row seat and eyewitness of the dropping of the World Trade Center in New York on 9/11. So that lesson alone taught me that you shouldn't take life so seriously. And if you want to learn more, just stay tuned.
Marshall Harris.
Yes.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You're an artist.
Among other things, yeah.
A 6'7" artist.
I don't think there's a prerequisite for height.
You're the tallest artist we've ever had on.
What have we had, 4 now? 4 artists?
6 maybe?
6?
We have a couple more.
Okay.
This is what happened. We interview, we send out emails to 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
25 that are artists, 25 that are journalists, 25 that are business owners.
Oh, okay.
25 artists respond and say yes. 1 business owner replies and says yes. 1 journalist.
Well, that was my first question was, how the hell did I wind up here? It's like, did you throw a dart?
Have you been featured in a publication of Fort Worth News or Dallas News? That's how. We scour that. So Hannah just scours that.
Got it.
And then anybody who's interesting that's featured, typically it's arts and business section. We haven't really interviewed very many business people.
So your assistant's reply back to my reply of Nathan really loves your work was kind of a fib?
No, because I approve everyone. So it all gets added to a spreadsheet.
Okay.
I then go and I approve it. Okay. You have this piece with, it's like eyeballs are like pencils.
Oh, okay. Did you see that over at Clayton Snodgrass's house, or did you see that online?
I saw it online.
Okay. Because that was one of those things I'm trying to put the puzzle pieces together is how did Nathan find me for, and it was a piece that a collector here in Dallas commissioned. And it's called The Artist Part 1 and Part 2. And I made these, because artists, we typically don't throw things away. So my practice right now is graphite on Mylar, and I make these enormous drawings and use up a lot of pencils. So the little teeny piece of pencil that's left, I toss in a jar. And after 10 years of drawing, I had a jar full of pencils. And so I thought one day, well, I'll do something weird with that. So I made a sculpture. I basically hot glued or super glued these pencils on these glasses, and I put them on, and I took a snapshot of myself just for fun. And I was at a gallery opening that I had a show space, kind of a residence, and I printed it out on my printer, life size, just the selfie, and I put it on the wall. And a collector came in from Dallas. He said, I want that. I said, well, I just printed that out on my printer. You don't want that, but I could do something like that for you. And that's how the piece came about. But the weird thing is I have this practice where I do these negative drawings where if you're familiar with how photography used to be done before digital, you'd go into a dark room and have a negative, and the negative produces a positive. Well, that's how I do my drawings. So I draw a negative, and then I have it high resolution scanned, and then when it's inverted, it turns into a positive. So the collector actually gets 2 pieces for the price of 1, but they get this crazy, almost X-ray looking kind of piece, and then when it's inverted, you can see what the original object looked like. So that's kind of the landing image on my website, and I think I've got it on my Instagram account. But it's when I talk to people about the process, their eyes roll back in their head. It's like, I don't get it.
I kind of get it. Good, because I've done film photography, and I'm familiar with Photoshop.
Okay,
so
I'm just making a negative. And what that does for me is artists that paint and they draw and they look at objects and they reproduce those things. Our brains make up for information, and especially if you're working in a process like myself, I do hyperrealism. So when my finished works look like photographs. And when you're working from an object, I'm looking at this thing of tomatoes, I try to draw all the details. And my brain makes up for information like in shadows and things that aren't quite clear. And so my finished drawings, normally the traditional method, people look at them, they go, oh, that's really badass. And I look at them and go, oh, but this is not right. I don't like that part. But when I do this inverted negative drawing process, I'm just following what the photography that I took is, because I work from photographs, what the photo tells me to draw. And so if it's fuzzy, or if it's, kind of blurry, or if it's, I don't even know what it is, it's just a splotch, I draw it exactly how the photograph tells me to. And it's not until it's inverted that I go, oh, that's the reflection of the lights in the room behind the shiny object. And
so you do it to get your brain to stop processing as much?
Yeah. So it tricks my head into not thinking about.
How'd you figure this out?
I had a commission for a piece. There's a collector in Houston, and her house is like a modern art museum. I mean, she's got original Rembrandt etchings, and she's got a lot of Jeff Koons pieces. And you may or may not know these names, but anyway,
I know Rembrandt.
Okay. Anyway, her collection is just outstanding. She was named the #1 collector in Houston several years ago, and so she talked to me and she said, "I'd like you to take and do a commission for me." And I said, okay, well, I always do commissions that are related to the person. I want to take and draw something or make something that is personal to you. It has a connection to you. And in her collection is, there's a Japanese ceramicist, her name is Aoki, and she does these ceramic skulls, white porcelain, but they look like they're fluid. And they're absolutely amazing pieces. She has one of these in her collection. I said, so I want to do that piece. And she says, well, I'd kind of like you to take and do this Jeff Koons piece. And I said, okay, I'll do a diptych. If you'll let me do this piece, I'll do that piece. And so in doing the first Jeff Koons piece, it's if you don't know.
Did you get paid twice?
No, no. But the result was I basically got 2 pieces, and
I was like, that's a great sales tactic.
Well, as long as I can charge for both, but usually it's a twofer. Anyway, so this Jeff Koons piece, it looks like a balloon dog, like a clown would put together, but it's made out of ceramics and it's finished in a real shiny finish. And when I first drew it, I was frustrated because I couldn't draw things like a speck of dust. So when you're drawing, in order to create the material I work on is Mylar, and what I draw with is pencils. And so in order to leave a speck of dust, you have to not draw in that spot. And the process that I work is you can either erase there or you just not draw in that spot. And I was frustrated because I couldn't create the detail that I wanted. So I thought, well, if I invert it, if I draw it the opposite way, a speck of dust is just a mark. And a fingerprint, I actually draw the fingerprint. And so the first time I did this and I blew it up, it's like, oh, I mean, it's just like head exploded. And so that's a process that I still do traditional drawing, but I like the inverted stuff a lot better.
So you take image, you invert image,
right?
You paint, you draw image,
right? Then I have it high resolution scanned image, and then in Photoshop I invert it, and then you print it. Right.
So you sell prints.
I sell the original and the prints.
Now, the original is a different color, though. It's black and white only, right?
Well, and the prints are black and white only.
Okay.
Although I do colorizations of stuff. And this all sort of goes back into my history, my background, which I can fill in. But we're all in a process of our history. And so I used to be in advertising and marketing. And so I'm familiar with, Photoshop and Illustrator. And I have always dabbled in traditional materials as well as the digital world. And I don't have a problem with that. And there's a lot of traditional people who goes, well, you don't really paint it. You digitally paint it. That's not, well, in another 20 years, you're not going to see a whole lot of people.
So do you have any NFTs?
No, I don't have any NFTs. We can get into that discussion later because I know Blake was into, we're going to make an NFT. And it's like, it takes me like 4 months to make a drawing. I guess if I could make an NFT and figure out how to sell it, it might be a revenue stream. But
yeah, with him, CNBC did like how people are making money on like NFTs and interviewed him. And so maybe that.
I tell you what, he's a
maybe
brand.
That's helped him.
He's a huge brand. I mean, his story, because I've listened to probably about 8 of the podcasts just to get a feeling for the dynamics of the discussion and stuff. And he's working it, man. He's working it big time.
Yeah, he's really the saying of like, I'm an overnight success, 10 years in the making or whatever. Like for him, like he was making a living. But it just took that one. It was that top still, and then skyrocketed.
And that's the nature of a lot of things, is being at the right place at the right time. Malcolm Gladwell wrote, was it Outliers?
Let's see, Outliers.
He wrote Blink, Outliers.
David and Goliath.
Yeah, but the Outliers book is about, there are so many Bill Gates is out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Just happened to be the one that was in the right place at the right time at the right cocktail party. And the story, that Blake was talking about being at the cocktail party and just like, crashing it and making stuff. I was like, that has balls.
The fact that I remember in Outliers when he said Bill Gates had more access to a computer than any other 14-year-old in the world because of the prestigious school he was at.
Right.
The kid's dad was one of the only 2 people in the United States that had a computer like that.
So it takes that you being really smart, but it takes being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and also how money can change people's like narratives. Like my friend wanted a painting of Zuckerberg to commemorate like successful entrepreneurs. I was like, Zuckerberg's one of the worst humans ever. Like now he's got like a hospital and like he's done a lot to like correct his image, but like he stole the idea from Facebook. That's proven in court. That was, he lost that case.
And he's still making billions of dollars. It's like you stole another two guys' ideas and you're still making tons of money.
And before Facebook, he downloaded the directory of everybody in Harvard and created like a Tinder hot or not, essentially.
Right.
And he then created it to where they would say, like, if they're ugly, they'd be compared to an animal.
Right.
So he it's like not a good thing. He doesn't get kicked out of Harvard, but he's very close.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the next idea. And even the text messages that were leaked, like he brags about screwing over the Winklevoss twins. Because he can't wait. He's so excited to do it because he came from a poor family. They came from a super rich, prestigious family, and he couldn't wait to screw them over. And he talks about it.
Yeah,
he's like, they're not going to see it coming. And I've already
Well, how much of that is tied to ego?
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who's successful has to have a very healthy self-impression and very confident in themselves and what they're doing. I mean, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing here if it were like, I got really nice suits and I got all the equipment, so I might as well do these interviews.
Well, this is what I tell people. The reason professors are never good entrepreneurs is because they're too smart. So my thing is, I was always not smart enough to talk myself out of something.
So you were self-schooled, I understand.
Yeah. So
you never learned the rules of, I can do that because nobody told me I couldn't.
Yeah. Well, here's a good example. I'm told like college, everybody's saying they're going to college, and my parents have never had a college talk with me. There was never like a thing. It was like, we can't afford it, so I guess you'll have to figure that out. I'm like, okay. And so I started doing research. I'm like, man, this is the only thing that's increased every year for 30 years straight. Like there's no other commodity, there's no other product, there's no other service that has increased every single year for 30 years straight other than universities. And it's weird. They make, and I've quoted this in 15 episodes, but the University of Texas makes $100 million a year off their football team and pays their employees, their players, nothing.
It's a business disguised as an education.
Yeah, and you see all this, and then the best part of it is it's like, oh, the government will back loans for people to give them a bunch of money. And I'm like, man, like, what if, let's say my advertising agency, if we approach somebody and they want a software built, and every time they want a software built, I was like, well, the government will give you a loan. They have to approve the loan to you to have your software built. I'd have $1 billion company.
Right.
It's free money. It's just ridiculous. And so I started coming out and saying like, hey, I think college is a scam. I think college, like I think there's a bunch of trade school jobs that are better for most people. I think that we're pushing a college narrative, even if it's not best for the person.
Well, we adopted a post World War II narrative that is based on you have to have a college education in order to take and have that dream, that American dream.
Yeah.
And it was created by the education system because they said, oh, we can take and actually create revenue by teaching people. And if we convince them that they can't get a good job by teaching people, revenue stream. And it's never changed. If you look at, and if you decide to go to a university, and now it's even crazier because I've got some nieces and my wife's got some relatives that are, going to college and applying to college, and you almost have to, declare before you even, when your entrance essay, it's like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a veterinarian. You got to decide your career track before you even go to school. Europe doesn't do that. Yeah. Europe, you go to school for 2 years before you take and declare anything. You're taking humanities, and you're taking liberal arts stuff, and you're taking some mathematics, and you're taking the things that allow you to form an idea of, oh yeah, this would be cool to do the rest of my life. Because the percentage of people who graduate in the U.S. and actually follow through with their degree is like abysmal. It's like, I don't know, 10% maybe.
So all that's to say, I start researching college, and I tell people, I'm getting to a point, by the way. It might take me a while. So I tell them, hey, I think this is a scam. And you realize that, like, hey, when people's whole livelihood is that they went to a college, like that's their biggest achievement, is that they gave a college a bunch of money. That's not like people weren't allowed to hang out with me. It was just like it became this like huge ordeal. And I was like, wow, this is really strange how bought into people. Like before, I remember thinking, like, how does nobody kill Hitler? Like, how does none of his men just go, this is get out of control and kill him? Mm-hmm. But then when you see, like, not the same, I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges or compare Hitler to college, by the way, but essentially you see this elitism, cult following to college and people's where they went.
Right.
And then you, okay, now I get this. Like people.
But I think that pendulum is starting to swing back. I've heard several.
The last 5 years it's gone crazy.
Has it? Even more so to the...
No, the other way. Like the last 5 years, since Gary Vaynerchuk became like a cool entrepreneur, when that happened and he then was like, college is stupid, like everybody...
Well, you have to have a patron saint. You have to have somebody who goes, wait a minute, they didn't do that. You know, I don't think everybody's cut out for college.
So anyway, I land on a community college because I had to pay for it myself. It's the only thing I can afford. And I know nothing about anything. And so I go into my classes and I can tell I'm smarter than everybody. So I go up to the teacher after and I'm like, hey, it's obviously clear that I'm smarter than everyone here.
How'd that tack work for you?
What do I need to do to get out of this class? Like, this is like, I saw the syllabus. I never had a syllabus before. Yeah. I'm like holding him like, I can clearly, you know, she's like, well, just come meet with me. Like if you think, so I was given an option to test out. So I tested out of every class my first semester, and it's community college. It's 12th grade. You know, it was just like redoing high school. Right. And so,
but you took the initiative to do it.
But the reason I was able to go ask and talk to her like that, and I wasn't scared to do that, is because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to.
Right.
And so that was the point I was saying of like, there's this big advantage to being dumb. And I don't remember what we were talking about to where we were talking about how that got into it. But that's the whole moral of the story.
Got it. Cool.
Okay. So I want to... How many months does it take you to draw one of these?
About 4. Well, it depends on what the piece is. I mean, it's one of the things that when I was driving over here, I was trying to figure out how do we get into this conversation. And I have this idea that the universe sends you messages when you need an answer. And there's a band called Rotter Sand, and the song was playing "You Know Nothing About Me," and I thought, well, that's perfect. That's a perfect intro because we really don't know anything about each other.
And we figured it all out here.
And we're trying to, you know, and so the rabbit hole, it can't be just, okay, Marsh, we're going to put you down the rabbit hole. We're going to ask all these questions and find out about you. But, you know, I'm curious about you as well, as like, you know, how does a dude invent this thing called a rabbit that goes into, you know, bars and restaurants, and so when my crappy phone runs out of juice, I can go get a carrot and plug it in. I mean, that's brilliant.
So with me, everything sounds way cooler than it is because I'm a good marketer.
Well, I know there's a lot of work that goes behind it. I was going, how does somebody invent something like that and then get it to market?
You know, anyway, but we haven't crushed them yet. I think the pandemic crushed them, actually. We didn't have to.
A lot of stuff. Actually, didn't crush me, though. I actually had a really, my wife and I are both independent contractors. She's a travel and writer, a travel and food journalist. And so she, you know, she writes for Texas Monthly and Texas Highways and does all these, you know, restaurant gigs and stuff. And when the pandemic hit and shut everything down, it was like, oh man. And I'm thinking, you know, nobody's going to buy art. They're too busy trying to put food on their tables.
Wrong.
And I was thinking, and I didn't recognize that there's a lot of people have a lot of disposable income, and they're usually going to Vail, and they're usually going to Europe, and they're usually buying a yacht. And now they're sitting at home looking at bare walls, and let's put some artwork on there. And so I had a great year.
The high-end Porsches are selling for 25% over MSRP.
It is nuts. Absolutely nuts.
So you're the second or third person to be on this podcast that was in New York City when 9/11 happened.
Really? Who was the first?
I don't know. Pierre, do you remember? Anyway, the guy essentially... his friend was like, hey, you got to go see this. You got to go see this. You got to go see this. He's like, I really don't want to go see this. Mm-hmm. And then, so he goes to see it September 10th.
Oh, okay.
Takes a photo, does the thing, and then he's at his friend's house on September 11th when it happens, and they like take their bikes down there. Right? Was that? Did I listen to that on podcast, or was that on my podcast?
Did I dream it? Is it like a?
I'm trying to remember right now. It doesn't matter. Okay. Tell me your story of 9/11 and being there.
Well, I got to warn you first of all that I sometimes use colorful language. Is that cool in this podcast? Okay, because it was fucked up. So in one of my many iterations professionally, I became an exhibit designer, and I designed exhibits for museums, aquariums, and then trade shows. And
Did you have the biggest thumb I've ever seen in my life?
It is a big ass thumb. I can't, it's like trying to type. I watch people do that, and I get really envious. So I usually keep my hands down below. So
exhibit designer.
So one of my clients, I've been designing trade show exhibits for them. They're in the business-to-business retail display industry, and so I've been designing trade shows for them for 4 or 5 years. They do shows in Chicago and Vegas and New York, and so this was trade shows being set up at the Javits Center, and I fly in. How many days are in August? 30 or 31? The last day of August. I fly in to set up this trade show the next day. Oh, no, I'm sorry. September 10th. I flew in September 10th. I had dinner at the Hard Rock Cafe in the evening, and I'm in a hotel that is probably 6 blocks away from the Javits Center. And there's this huge thunder and lightning storm. I mean, just immense. And I love thunder and lightning anyway. But I mean, it was just like this amazing lightning storm. And I go to the hotel, and I have plans the next morning to meet some people at the Top of the World restaurant at the Trade Center. And so I go to bed, and I forget to set my alarm. Supposed to be on the Javits Center floor to start uncrating things and setting up this trade show at 8:30 in the morning. So I get up late, and so instead of meeting my friends at the World Trade Center for breakfast, I text them. I say, or call them. They don't text and have it yet. Call them. I say I can't make it, and so I walked to the Javits Center. It was a beautiful morning. I mean, it was because the rain washed all the pollution out. So amazing blue skies, and I get in the Javits Center, and I'm there, and there's fork trucks driving all over. It's just crazy madhouse. And all of a sudden, I thought I heard what sounded like thunder, and I thought, well, that's weird because last night it rained, and I didn't see any clouds in the sky this morning. And then about 30 minutes later, there was no movement on the trade show floor at all. I mean, it was just like dead silent. And when you set up a trade show, you're working with all these union guys, and they all get dispersed from this one place, and so all of the trade show stuff gets dispersed on the floor, and then all the maintenance people, all the electricians and the riggers, they all get dispersed, and all of them disappear too. And so I go to where all these people they're dispersed from, and they're all hung around there. And a person is on the PA, and he's saying, we're not sure what happened. There was an incident in the World Trade Center. The government is shutting down all unessential businesses. We need you to take and go get your tools and leave the building immediately. So I leave the building. I don't know what time it is now, but I walk out of the front of the building, and there's these big steps that go down, and you can see the World Trade Center's off probably 4 blocks. I mean, not too far. And there's this woman, and she's crying. And I said, what's the matter? And I look over, and I said, where's the other tower? And she said, it just fell down. And I said, what do you mean it fell down? She said, the tower collapsed. And there wasn't cell phone service was non-existent. Everything got shut down. And so I freaked, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to walk back to my hotel. And so I'm walking back through central Times Square, and there's no traffic, and there's no people. All you hear is sirens and stuff. And the big Trinitron that, usually shows, Coca-Cola commercials and the NASDAQ and all that stuff is showing live stream footage from the tower, the one tower that's left with all this smoke billowing out of it. And because it's not edited, it's just raw footage that the news people are feeding through there. They're not a producer here that, it's like, okay, cut that out. And so I'm watching this, and it looks.
Watching people jumping.
I thought, it was like, oh, is that paper? Holy Christ, that's a person. And I was like, this is really, really bad. And about a minute after that, the second tower came down. So I didn't want to go back to my hotel. I didn't want to go any building. So I walked to Central Park, And Central Park's far enough away from the point, ground zero, that there were people picnicking and playing Frisbee. And it was like, it's like New York. It's like, stuff really bad happens downtown, and it's like we're still riding the Ferris wheel and let's go get on the merry-go-round. And I'm just like, you guys don't realize what just happened down there, because it's really messed up. And so I'm sitting on this park bench, and this old man with his little sack lunch comes over and he sits down next to me. He goes, "You mind if I, sit next to you on the park bench here?" And I'm like, I can't even talk. And I said, no, just go ahead, sit there. And he gets out his peanut butter and jelly sandwich and starts talking to me about how he eats at the diner in the morning, and he gets the jelly for a sandwich from the thing. He says they only have apple left over, so he doesn't really like apple jelly. And my brain is just trying to process this. And I looked at him, and he said, I said, "Do you know what just happened? Do you know what happened this morning downtown?" He says, "Yeah, I've been listening to the radio." And I said, "How can you be so calm about this?" And he says, "Son, tomorrow's not guaranteed to anybody. So do you need to embrace that, and this is coming from like an 87-year-old guy eating his peanut butter and jelly sandwich." And it was that moment, it was like heaven came down and tapped me on the head and said, "I don't think you're happy doing what you're doing. I'm not going to tell you what you're going to do, but what you're doing is not what you need to be doing." I mean, it wasn't that clear, but in the year or so afterwards, it became apparent to me that I was supposed to have breakfast in one of those towers. My friends were out of there before the towers came down. And if I had kept my plans and been there for breakfast, I wouldn't be here today. And so for me to waste another minute doing something that I didn't want to do, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do anymore. And that's sort of the lesson of you can't take life so seriously. You have to, when I sort of just, for the first 50 years of my life, the sphincter factor was just enormous. I was just regretted yesterday and was worrying about tomorrow, and everything was just tensed up. And as soon as I just went, just show me what I'm supposed to do today, I'll make the best decision I can. And eventually it worked out. I mean, I'm here today. I'm doing something that I would never have dreamed of doing when I was in college, and really not until, that day of the universe saying, you got to do something else.
Yeah,
and I always get choked up. Apologize for getting a little perclamped, but it's
all good. No, it's amazing how short life is.
Yeah.
And how unassured life is. Like when I had a friend whose employee died at 25 in her sleep, just a brain aneurysm.
Mm-hmm.
No reason why, nothing wrong, not on drugs, and just didn't wake up.
Yeah. I mean, we all think that we're, immortal. We're going to live forever. There's nothing written anywhere that says tomorrow you're going to exist. Yeah. All you have to do is wake up this morning, be grateful that you did, drink coffee or whatever you're having, do the best you can at what you're doing. And at the end of the day, if it didn't work out, okay, well, maybe tomorrow will be better. If it worked out great, then super,
yeah. Or drive on the interstates in Dallas and start to be like, our life's not promised.
Driving over here, it was like, where are you guys going so fast? We're going to Dallas. You don't drive fast until you get there. It was crazy.
It is. Dallas drivers, they love the swerve technique. I count this one driver. I now just count. I mean, just
the number of times he changed lanes.
Yeah, 9 times in like 45 seconds.
Like, just pick a lane, dude. Just drive in it. just pick a lane.
I'm always going over 100 miles per hour, but I'm in the fast lane.
Really?
I drive fast, but I'm in the fast lane. I don't tell people. I don't switch lanes.
Can you text me next time you're going to get on the road so I can stay off of it?
I get nowhere near people. I go to the expressway underground.
Oh, okay.
There's no other cars, and I do my thing.
Cool. So things like speed limits don't apply to you. It's like, nah, and that's just a guideline.
Well, I feel this is maybe I'm wrong, and by that I mean I am wrong. But if I pay to drive on your road.
Okay, toll road.
Do I have, and there's no other cars.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm damaging nobody's lives but my own.
Yeah.
I have some, and I'm in a nice German car that can handle high speeds.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about
I'm going to predict that when you have your son and he's in a car seat next to you in your rocket.
I'm very, when my wife's in the car, I don't really speak. Yeah, I understand when it's my life versus others. And I've also had the argument, well, like, I don't know, I don't do anything stupid. Like, you're not going to see me serving lanes. You're not going to see me telling people.
Texting and driving like that, like that.
I do it to drive on my knees occasionally.
It was the president of this company that I was doing this trade show with, and he made a lot of trips out to New Mexico, out to, I don't know what,
Albuquerque.
Yeah, one of those. It was one of our
it's
big,
the only
big
city
clients
I know
out there.
in New Mexico.
Well, but I mean, it's like he said, it's like straight road. And he said, I read the newspaper. I said, you read the newspaper while you're driving? He says, it's a straight road for like 90 miles. I could do, unless I were to take and do like this, I can do the crossword section. Oh, man.
See, that's a little much for me. That's a little much for me.
I trust the universe, but not that much, dude. With a self-driving car thing, I'm going to be like this the whole time. Just have my hands just like, I'm trusting you, not.
All right. How old are you?
65.
So how old were you?
About that.
So the NFL was a way different kind of machine when you played in it.
Yeah, sort of. We didn't get paid much, or we didn't get paid as much. I mean, the collective bargaining agreements put athletes in the stratosphere of incomes. We like to think that we set the standard for that. But if I told you what I got, my first contract with the New York Jets was, you'd laugh, because it was. I didn't have an agent. I got drafted 8th round, but it was I played on a football team in college that was just horrible. I think we won 2 games the entire 5 years I was playing.
And you still got drafted?
Well, because I played defense, there's a different mindset for defense and offense. And defense, if you're on a horrible team, statistically, you're going to be on the field longer. And so I have this theory that it's merely a statistical regularity, that if I'm a defensive lineman and the ball's going to run to either the right side or the left side, then I'm going to get, every time it comes to my side, I'm going to be the first person there to be able to tackle somebody. So if I do my job, then I'm going to have a lot of tackles. And that's how it worked out. It wasn't that way I was, superhuman strong or anything like that. I just applied myself and thought, well, I'm going to be here for 3/4 of the game. I might as well do a good job. And so, although we didn't win any games, my playing abilities made up for a lack of winning.
Okay, so you get drafted by the Jets. How long are you there for?
3 weeks. So I get to the New York Jets. I'm in camp. I look at the statistics the number of players that go from high school to college and play is like big to small, and then from college to pros is even smaller. So I got drafted 8th round. The number 1 draft pick was Marty Lyons from the University of Alabama, I think. Same position as I was, and a guy named Mark Gastineau from East Oklahoma or something, and he was just a maniac. And both of them were like super All-Americans. And I'm going, okay, I'm vying for the same position there, and I don't know. I'm going to be a good practice dummy. I don't know about my longevity here. And so, but what was the tipping point of me saying, I don't know if the pros were well, first of all, I came in, I didn't think I was going to get drafted. I thought finishing in college at TCU that I was done. And so I was, getting ready to go surf or do something. And I get this phone call that, I've been drafted by the New York Jets. And I go, shit. Okay, well, when do I got to report? So I go to camp, and I'm in camp, and things are going okay. I'm not doing terrible. But it's been the first time I'm away from home, and I'm in New York, and we're at Hofstra University, which is not even in New York, it's in Long Island. And Hofstra University has these big high-rise dormitories. And we're walking out, going to morning practice one morning, and as I'm walking out, I see this object go across the way from the other building. And I look, and it's a person. And I went, and Joe Klecko, who was like this, amazing All-American, All-Pro, I think he was offensive guard or offensive tackle or something, was walking right behind me. And I said, holy shit, somebody just jumped off that building across the way. And Klecko goes, yeah, son, you're in New York. Welcome. It happens every day. So I go to practice that day going, I just saw a guy jump off of a building, and a human body will bounce when it hits. It actually bounces. And so that evening after practice, I decided, okay, I don't see myself making it with this team. We're well enough along in camp that I'm not going to get cut and picked up by another team. So I'm just going to quit. Well, it was unheard of to take and have anybody walk out of camp. But the next day I went to my position coach and I said, Coach, I really appreciate the opportunity that you've given me here, but I just don't think it's going to work out. And he said, well, you need to go talk to Coach Michaels, who was the head coach. And I said, do I really? He said, yeah, you need to go talk to him before you make that decision. So I go to Walt Michaels. And Walt Michaels he's a gruff old son of a bitch. And so
he's an NFL coach.
NFL coach, yeah. He was one of the old school coaches. He didn't mess around. And so Walt Michaels sitting across his desk, and he said, what's your name? I said, Marshall Harris, coach. He says, and Walt Michaels was one of the coaches. He talked to his quarterbacks and maybe his receivers, but he didn't have a whole lot of rapport with any of the other players. And so he didn't know who I was from anybody. And I said, Coach, I don't think it's going to work out here. I'm going to leave camp. And I've already made some plans to work in New York in an ad agency. And he said, son, if you quit this team, you won't be able to sell pencils in the street corner, and I'll make sure that happens. I said, okay, well, do your worst. I said, frankly, I don't think you're a great head coach, but that's just my 2 cents. And, kid coming from Texas. And I left the meeting. So I do.
His bluff didn't work.
Well, his bluff didn't work. However, the story of don't burn bridges comes up in just a minute. So I leave camp. My folks come up. They think I'm crazy. What are you doing? Chance of a lifetime. Well, I'm going to be working in New York at this ad agency, and I was doing paste up work. I was just an entry level art director at this agency, and about 3/4 of the way into the NFL season, I start going, oh man, was that a bonehead move for me to take and quit? So I called my position coach back up with the Jets and the player personnel director. I said, I don't know if there's anything you can do for me. I said, but if I wind up waking up someday and I'm 40 years old and I think, wow, man, you just screwed the pooch. You could have had a shot. And they said, well, we can't have you back on the team. We don't take players back who have left camp. And anybody you negotiate with, you need to let them know that we own your contract. So anybody you go try out with, it's not like you can walk onto the team. They got to pay us to take and have you on the team. So your chances of going somewhere are pretty slim. Well, the Cleveland Browns, their offensive coordinator was a guy named Jim Schaffner. And Jim Schaffner was my head coach at TCU my freshman and sophomore year. So he knew how I played. And so he got in touch with their player personnel director, and I got a call from the Browns, and they said, we understand that you might want to try out or go back into the league. And I said, yeah, I think I made a ill-informed decision. And they said, well, we'd like to bring you up and have you try out. And the guy who was their all-American defensive end, a guy named Jerry Shirk, had wrecked his knee. And he had knee surgery, but then he got a staph infection. So they didn't know if he was going to be able to play the next year. And so they brought me in for tryouts. They brought me in and signed me really low-paying contract, but at least I got a second shot. And so the next season comes around. I've gone through training camp, and it's the opening season Monday night football game. And we're playing, I think, the Houston Oilers in Cleveland. And Cleveland fans are just like nuts. I mean, they're 85,000 screaming fans, whether you're winning or losing. So it's Monday Night Football. We're playing the Houston Oilers. The stadium is completely filled. And I'm sitting back in my locker just chilling because there's no way in hell I'm going to play. I mean, it's just like Jerry's playing and Lyle Alzato's there and everybody's good. And I'll sit on the sidelines and this will be a great show. And my position coach comes up and he says, Marshall, do you know the game plan? Or and I said, yeah, coach, I knew that on Monday. I said, I'm a quick study. He says, good, because you're starting. And so 5 minutes later, I had as a rookie, my first debut on Monday Night Football with the Cleveland Browns. And it was a great year. We became the Cardiac Kids because we won. We were 11-5, or 5, 11-5. Wins first, losses second, and we won 9 of the 11 games in the last 2 minutes by like 3 points, like a field goal or something. So the Cardiac Kids. The next year we had the exact opposite record of 5-11 by losing those 9 games in the last 2 minutes. So it just goes to show one play can take you to being from Ray, we're your heroes, into Cleveland to, oh, you guys suck. But they filled the stadiums anyway. So.
And you were just there 2 seasons, or?
I was there 3, and then they brought in a hotshot defensive end. I was really great in the run play, but I wasn't great in pass rushing. And so they brought in a guy who actually did both, and so his name is Reggie Camp. So he came in, and I thought I was going to be playing backup, but they wound up trading me to the New England Patriots. And so I played 1 season with the Patriots, and I got a call around Thanksgiving from my agent, and he said, hey, would you think about jumping leagues to this thing called the USFL? And that was the United States Football League. It was the alternative league that was...
Isn't that what the WWE guy started?
Yeah, well, they started one that was after this.
Okay.
The USFL was really the very first iteration, and the teams were actually pretty good. They had 1 season. The New Jersey Generals, which is the team that I wound up on, had Herschel Walker, and they wound up having Doug Flutie the last season.
Did you get paid better there?
Way better. And they guaranteed him. This was the story. My agent called me and he said, so here's the money they're talking about, and it's a guaranteed contract. And I said, well, what's that mean? He says, well, if you're playing and you get hurt, they pay you anyway. If you're playing and they cut you from the team, they pay you anyway. It's like a contract with a regular company. And I said, well, who wouldn't want that deal? So the team owner happened to be Donald Trump. And so
he owned a football team?
Well, he tried to buy the Buffalo Bills the year before, and the owner said, no, we don't want you in the league. So he got, he said, well, I'm going to take, and he purchased ownership in the New Jersey Generals. And so part of my initial meeting was meeting Donald Trump in the Trump Towers in his office. And it was a much younger version of him.
Yeah,
but not much
how long
different.
ago was this?
1985. And
so he's probably about 50 pounds slimmer then?
Me?
Him.
Yeah, probably. I didn't really take a lot of notes because I was more concerned that the team didn't have a head coach when I signed my contract with them. And just before we went to training camp, right after I met with Donald Trump, they hired a guy named Walt Michaels as the head coach. And so I came into a team from another league with a head coach that I told him he wasn't a very good head coach. And so walking into training camp the very first day, Trump brought in 14 vets from the NFL. I mean, he loaded his team with some really good players. Brian Sipe came with me from the Cleveland Browns, and I'm trying to remember all the guys' names. But, I mean, they were players that were ending their careers in the NFL or the league was loaded with guys who were caught up in the numbers. There are a couple of teams that could have played anybody in the NFL and put on a good show. But anyway, I came in, and the very first day they're introducing all the coaches and all the players, and the players who come in, they're brand new. And afterwards, I walk over to Walt Michaels. I said, Coach Michaels, I'm Marshall Harris. I don't know if you remember me or not, but I'd like to, say I'm really excited to be on the team, and I'll do my very best for you this time around. And he says, I remember you. Didn't shake my hand. Gave me that cold fish look. Oh, man, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough here. Anyway,
I kind of have that story with Dave Ramsey, the financial guy. I made a snide comment about well, at least I didn't get rich from the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it came back to bite you sometime.
We ended up, I make this 3-4 years earlier. I get in a slight argument over how he's made his wealth, which is essentially him not selling his courses, but going into churches and them selling their courses to their people. Right. And I'm sure they've improved lives. And probably heard some too for people that think they don't need a credit score to buy a house.
Right.
But anyway, and so then one day it's we happen to be seated next to each other at church. I guess we go to the same church or used to. And it's hey, meet the person next to you. And so I talking to his wife. She's great. And he turns, he looks at me, and he just looks right back.
I don't see you. You're invisible.
And I just like played it off. It's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, that was another one of those things of, and unfortunately, I've got wiring that I speak my mind, and
I think that's fortunately.
It works out sometimes, and when I recognize that, I speak honestly. I'm not making up anything. I'm making observations, and sometimes it comes out, and the people that I'm observing don't appreciate it very much. And so, on occasion, I've said some things that I wish I had not.
So you were there one season?
I was there one season. Played, came back the second season. We were into the second game, and my coach came and he said, it was interesting because after the second game, we played Memphis, and I actually got playing time in this game in Memphis. It was, the year before I practiced, never got to play. Second year, come in, they put me in this game. I have a great game. Caused a fumble, 2 sacks, like 8 tackles. And after the game, after we watched game films and stuff, my coach says, the player personnel director would like to see you in his office. Bring your playbook, which meant you're gone. And so I'm in the player personnel office, and he said, well, we're gonna let you go. And I said, well, you do realize that I have a 3-year contract, and you still have 2 years of obligation in that contract, just guaranteed. And he said, well, I don't know about that. I said, I can bring you the signed contract and show you. He said, well, okay, you still need to pack your bags. We'll get you a plane flight home. So I go plane flight home. Next couple of weeks, you get paid weekly during the season. And so I get a check, and then I get another check, and then crickets. And I call the offices. Nobody's returning my calls. Contact my agent. I said, what's up? And he says, I don't know. And we wound up having to sue them. We went to mediation, and I discovered that there's a business acumen that has been adopted by that owner of we don't honor contracts. And the legal argument was, well, you didn't have a personal guarantee from Donald Trump. You had a team guarantee, and so what are you willing to settle for? And I said, I'm not willing to settle for anything. I said, it's a $750,000 contract. I've been paid $100,000 and then a couple little checks. So there's some significant money on the table. And so they made us fly to New York for the mediations. My wife at the time was like 9 months and a day pregnant. I mean, she was just ready to have our son any minute now. And we were there for 3 weeks. In negotiations, and they tried to tell me that I wasn't interested in playing anymore. That the team in Memphis had tried to reach me for a tryout, and I said, "Well, when did they try to reach you?" And it was over Easter weekend. They said they tried to call you on Easter weekend to come in on Easter Sunday for a tryout. I went, well, that was bullshit because who comes in for a tryout on Easter weekend? Anyway, then we wound up settling because they came back and they said, well, nobody knows this yet, but the league is going to take and file for bankruptcy. So you can either take what money we put on the table now, or you can get in line with everybody else. And we're talking thousands of people that were left, holding the bag when the league folded. All the players, all the owners, all the people to support, coaching staff, all the concessionaires, all the people parking stuff, they were all out of a job. So I got a little bit, but anyway, that was the swan song. I said, okay, this is enough of professional football. I need to go and get a real job now.
And advertising's where you went.
And that's where I went because I had when I played with the Cleveland Browns in the off season, there was a company called Wise Advertising, and at the time, Cleveland was a huge advertising hub. There was New York, Cleveland, Chicago, L.A., so the ad agencies in Cleveland were not as big as the really huge ones in New York, but they were substantial. We had Sherwin-Williams Paints and Tyson Foods and a bunch of big name. And so I worked in the off season as an art director and made some great business connections there and sort of got my feet wet and kind of figured out what the advertising world was like. So when I retired, I had a natural land. People knew that, I could art direct and I could design some stuff and I had some art skills. And so I transitioned from knocking heads to...
And what year was this?
80... 7.
So when you're designing something, are you having to like paste letters like?
Yeah, that was old school.
Yeah,
was
right.
You'd get galleys of type. You'd have the photographer take the photos. You'd literally do a scaling. You'd say, crop it here, and you'd send it to a guy who was a retoucher, and he would physically retouch the photos with an airbrush and stuff. And when I was in Cleveland doing that after I retired, there was a company. Wise Advertising was the ad agency, and there were all these support companies that took and supplied them with typesetting, and then the paste up work, and then there were photo strippers. So you actually created what was called a mechanical. And so for an ad, you'd have a photo, and you'd have galleys of type, and then you'd have the logos and stuff, and you actually physically put it together on what's called a mechanical board. So it's like poster board, and you paste all these things up. And a friend of mine, a guy named Tom Rasick, worked with the typographer that everybody went to, and they had a paste up department. So the art directors and the writers would send all their stuff to this company. They would typeset it. They would do all of the pasteboard stuff, and then they'd send it back for you to take and approve and mark up. And that's how it was done. It was a very physical process. And it was just about the time that desktop publishing started to rear its head. I mean, Apple had that big block that had that, like a Pong screen was about and they'd just come out with the very first Mac. And I read about this thing called desktop publishing. And so I talked to Tom over lunch and beers one day, and I said, Tom, suppose there was a way that an art director could do the concepting and the writer could write their thing on their little machine, and it could all be composed in a computer. And so the typesetting and all of that sort of stuff could be done in a digital environment as opposed to you doing what you do on your company. He said, that would be remarkable. And I said, well, you want to start a company? And so we started Harris Rasick Design, and we were a boutique agency that we did work for banks, and we did everything. I mean, we did point of purchase materials, we did advertising, we did exhibit designs, all sorts of crazy stuff, point of purchase and direct mail pieces. Anything that anybody needed done that was kind of out of the box, that's what we did. And using the very rudimentary software that Adobe came out with. There was PageMaker, Quark was kind of happening, but it wasn't you had to actually close an application that you were working in, yeah. Copy that, and then open up PageMaker and then paste it into there. So it was, 25 megs of RAM was like $800 or $1,000. It was like, there's more computing on my phone than we ever had in the studio. Anyway, so that's how I got into advertising and graphic design.
So you were the first to use a computer.
Yeah, we spent an obscene amount of money on machinery. $6,000 monitor, $10,000 computer with hard drives that were the thumb drive chip cards now that are just have enormously more capacity. But yeah, that's how we started.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
because I've met people that were before that time, where they were like cutting out the letters and then putting it, and I was just like, man, that's crazy.
Well, that's what I did in New York. That was basically, the paste up stuff was the extent of, if I didn't cut myself with an X-Acto knife every day, I was.
Oh man, that's so crazy to me. And I also think about like how many, so I have a design firm. We offer unlimited revisions because we believe you shouldn't have to pay for something you're not happy about. Mm-hmm. We also believe we're the experts, so that like unless it's something. If it's actual design theology, then we'll have a conversation about it. Right. But the reason we're able to do that is because like we just make a revision and then email it out.
Right. Yeah. But before then, well, I think that technology has allowed us to be much more fluid in terms of revisions. I don't know if they've actually improved the craft, because there was a photographer that I worked with. This guy was named Ed Nano. And his primary business was Sherwin-Williams and Rubbermaid. And he was old world photography. Everything was film and stuff like that. And he would drive art directors crazy because everybody, you'd set up a shot, and then typically you'd take a Polaroid of that and you'd show that to the art director. And the art director would say, no, move that basket of tomatoes over a little bit. Let's fill this here and put a little light and that kind of stuff. And Ed Nano would do none of that. He'd basically set everything up, light it, have the art director come and look through the camera, and then he'd take a photo. And it didn't, but every photo was just choice. He composed it all in his head. All the exposures were dialed in because he knew the craft.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, let's add that filter, or let's make it out of focus. It can all be done digitally, and so but nobody does it on set. I mean, it's all done in post. And so the number of revisions as a later age art director, you'd have to dial in the client and say, okay, we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to get as close to what you have in mind as possible, so that I'm not spending up, I'm not running out. You say, I want some ice cream, and I go out and I bring back ice cream, and you go, no, that's not the flavor I want. Well, what flavor do you want? I'm not sure, but that's not it. I know you have that sort of back and forth with, I know what I want, but that's not it.
Yeah.
And you can burn up thousands of hours.
And that's where it's all about being the expert. Like we always tell people, like the reason I don't care about your opinion is because I'm the best at this.
Can you really tell people that?
Oh, I mean, when somebody pays us $25,000 to build a website, they're paying us to do our job.
Okay.
And so if we built $100 websites, that's when people try to like push you around.
That's fascinating.
It's
fascinating that the more you charge for a product, the
better clientele you get.
Well, the better clientele and the assumed expertise that you have.
Yeah. It's true. Like if you it's not that you devalue your, like when you lower the price on something, unless you want to do that, most of the time you're lowering your value to them.
Yeah. Well, that's because my practice now is I'm a studio artist, and I do these works that are, they take 300 or 400 hours to complete, and they're enormous, and they're, incredibly detailed, and they cost, they're not cheap.
What do they cost?
25, 30,000. I mean,
how big are they?
Well, the saddle drawings that I do are 5 feet by 5 feet. A couple of the drawings that you saw, I don't know if you've looked at my website or not, but they're 5 by 30 feet. They're big, they're huge, and again they look like they're photographs. And so they're for a clientele that is a serious collector, that knows quality and knows the investment of something that's a one of a kind. If you go out and you want to buy a $10 wallet, you spend $10 on a wallet. But if you want to have somebody custom make you a wallet out of a particular kind of leather, and they're the best craftsmen in the world, it's not going to cost you $10. You're not going to get a custom built car for the same price you're going to get a Toyota.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the niche market that I'm going for with my work.
Does light affect your work? Like, does it fade it over time? Like, how does it?
No, actually, the Mylar that I work on, and I've got other works that I do too. I sort of look at my drawings as my day job, because it takes so long to do them. I literally have a studio that I go into, and I'm on the drawing board about 6 to 8 hours a day. That's about as long as I can draw before my head explodes. But I document how many hours on the drawing board, how many hours it takes to take and do a drawing. But then I get this sort of side stuff that I can go off and do fun sculptures and different things. And but the Mylar that I draw on is inert. It's basically a plastic with a tooth to it. And architects and engineers used to do it before CAD came along, because you could draw a line on it, and then the client could come in and say, no, I want that window over here, and you could erase it and just redraw it. And the Mylar wouldn't be affected. It's basically, you can erase it and draw it back into it. And that's what's really brilliant about it. Unlike paper that's a fiber, and as soon as you put some medium on it, either adding or subtracting, it changes the surface and it acts different. So when I discovered Mylar, it was kind of like magical. I can make when you look at my work, you can't find the pencil lines. It's all just gradations and stuff.
So cool. Yeah, I'm obsessed with it.
Well, I have to either come by one of the shows I got, or
one of your next shows.
I don't have any planned right now. I'm actually got a project that I'm leaving the country in September to go to France for 3 months. There's a gig over there for an artist residency, and it's in a practice that's completely out of my wheelhouse. It's called social practice, and there's a group over there called FACE. It's the French American Creative Exchange, And the group works with different school organizations and usually people who don't have the advantage of being exposed to culture. And in Europe, the municipalities, the communities, the government pours lots of money into community-based art things because they recognize the repayment value of it. Keep people happy, keep them making music, making art, learning new things, learning how to garden, and they're much happier about their shitty jobs. That's the economics behind it. But this group works with usually kids who don't have great access to art programs or music programs. And oddly enough, the area of Paris that I'm working in is called the La Canuve area. It's outside of the Mont districts, and it's got a factory there that the owner of this organization bought. It's a 1,000-year-old grain mill that he's slowly renovating and turning it into green technology and artist spaces. And so he runs this program out of there. But also in this La Canuve area is the equivalent of an NFL football team called the Flash. And I didn't know that Europe had American rules football over there, but it's huge. And Netflix is going to be filming a program with this team in the fall when I'm there about the popularity of American rules football in Europe. And France alone has 6 teams. There are 230 teams all over Europe. So Berlin and Cologne and Barcelona and Reykjavik, and there are teams in Russia, and they all play each other, and they all have really badass names. And so
I bet Russians dominate it.
No, actually, the Paris team that I'm with has won the last 6 years championships.
Wow.
But Monty Laster is the guy who's running this program, the FACE program, and one of his board of directors is a guy named Bruno, who actually is the manager and owner of The Flash. So when Monty pitched this idea, bringing this American artist over to work with the FACE exchange, and pitched it to his buddy Bruno, Bruno just lit up. He said, that would be great. He could work with my players and coaches. We could do something cool and artistic. And so we're going over there for 3 months, and I'm going to be involved in inventing something, because the nature of a social practice is, because it takes so long for me to do a drawing, it's not like I could go over there for 3 months. I could produce one work. And I wouldn't be working with anybody. It's basically drawing all day long. And Monty said, no, we're going to take, and when you get there, we're going to meet the team, we're going to meet the coaches, we're going to meet the school kids, and we're going to create something. And then it's like, oh, that's scary as shit, but it's also very, very cool, because it takes me out of my comfort zone of, when I sit down at the drawing table, I know exactly what I want the finished piece to look like. But in this process, I don't know. It might be a dance project. It might be hopscotch with football players. And we might be wearing tutus and ballerina stuff. I don't know. We're going to make it up when we get over there. And that's really pretty cool. And it's in Paris. So it's not like it's an artist residency in Toledo, Ohio or somewhere like that. It's in Paris, man.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So I don't have any shows lined up right now. There will be a show that comes out of this project that will be it'll be shown in Paris, either at the American Embassy or somewhere like that, and then that show will come over to the States. And we're actually talking to some people in Dallas now.
When will it be shown in Paris?
Paris, it'll probably happen in spring of 2022. We'll need to finish up the residency. They film and document all this stuff, so one of the components is a cinematographer who'll be documenting all this. My wife's going with me. She's going to be the documentarian. So it's really a multi-leveled story of this. We've titled it The American Yeti in Paris, because my nickname is Yeti. And so my wife and I will go over there, and it's going to be this whole project, which is really, really cool and different. But it's also my wife and myself being in the overall umbrella theme for it is resilience, or rebounding, and how the culture in France is coming back after COVID, how this team is rebuilding and figuring out how to take and do participant sports again. And they have all sorts of, the really cool thing about it is this program with the NFL, or the equivalent of the NFL, is much more engaged in social connection than the NFL here is. I mean, here in the NFL, it's about paying athletes a lot of money for their extraordinary, and making merch and doing advertising, and everybody, and they're these superstars that have no really connection with the public, and it's just the exact opposite over there. The players are expected to engage with the local community and do community service work and really get involved, and it really builds a really cool following for the team. That's one of the reasons that the popularity of it is so extraordinary, because the people who play are like doctors or accountants or truck drivers, and they get together and they play really good football, but then have this connection with the community that is like extraordinary. So it's going to be cool. I'm excited about it. And that part, there'll at least be a film that comes out of it, and the physical exhibit probably won't happen until fall of 22 or something like that.
Well, I'll definitely go to that.
Okay. Well, I'll take and make sure that you're on the VIP list.
Yeah, we're, because you don't have to pay for a baby ticket. Yeah, no. So we're
no, and exposing your kids to culture is we've got these two friends we call the Absinthe Twins, because we originally met them in Fort Worth drinking absinthe, and he works for American Airlines, and they have two kids that are just the coolest kids in the world, and the kids call themselves, he calls the little boy's like 10, he's Uncle Larry, and his sister is Creepy Steve, and that's what they call each other. But they go on trips they're, instead of going to the Fort Worth Zoo or the aquarium, they fly to Singapore. Yeah. Or they go to or they go to Paris, and they don't do anything other than go to museums, or they go on a culinary trip to Japan, and their kids do nothing besides eat sushi for a week. And they're the coolest. I mean, you can have a conversation with a 9-year-old like you and I are having, because they're just so open because their parents have, drug them all these places, and now it's just like second nature. So when you have your son or any other kids, take them everywhere you go.
That's fun. So we're planning to private tutor,
yeah,
because we don't want 8 hours wasted in a building. We just think that we can speed it up. The average says about 1.5 hours to 2 hours of one-on-one focus time is the same as all day at a school. Right. So then that gives them all the time to do whatever.
Right. Again, the European model, they don't keep the kids in school. I mean, they don't have any homework. Kids in Europe don't have homework. Yeah. They basically, the idea that your brain can only absorb what your butt can tolerate. So as soon as you're tired of sitting, your attention wanders, and that applies whether you're a kid or whether you're an adult. And so in Europe, their programs are much more inventive playtime.
Yeah, we have our school system's a mess. I mean, it's designed for when we made Model Ts. And we don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do that anymore, but our whole system is around putting people in assembly lines. That's our whole school system.
Right.
But
we don't have assembly lines anymore.
Yeah.
That's the problem, is we're schooling for an assembly line job, and we don't have any assembly lines. So now we got to go to college, and now you got to get a degree so you can be an advanced, well, who's going to take and build our cars?
Exactly. What if your son has no interest in business? I go, well, that's fine. He's going to know how to think for himself. He's going to be well-rounded. He's going to be very well-read.
Right.
And that's the key to being successful.
Thinkers. Critical thinkers.
Yeah, I don't need him to love business in the way I love business.
Right.
I think it will probably be a natural thing that he will, but if he doesn't, so be it. I think.
Are you going to be cool with that?
Huh?
Are you going to be cool with that?
Yeah, my pride has never come from business.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I love people, which is why I do this podcast. And business allows me to be in front of a lot of people.
Right. Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, because it's like doing some deep dive work on you. You're kind of etheric, and so one of those questions is, well, what do you do? And I get that all the time. Is, well, what do you do? And I go, about what?
Yeah.
And, because people want to know, they want to be able to classify you and say, well, you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that immediately puts you in a stereotype of what an entrepreneur is, or, what do you do? I'm an artist. I mean, it took me a really long time to be able to say I'm an artist, but now I'm recognizing that as soon as I say I'm an artist, now they're dressing me with that stereotype. So I'd rather enter a conversation about, well, what do you really love? What really turns you on? And that can be a lot of different things. And that generates a conversation that's much more personal than, well, I go to a cubicle every day and I do this kind of thing.
Well, Dallas, everybody here works for a giant corporation that we've met. I'm trying my best to
Well, you're new.
Yeah.
You're a newbie to Dallas, and we live in Fort Worth. We live in Fort Worth for a reason, and the dynamics between Fort Worth and Dallas has always been this love-hate relationship. People in Fort Worth wish they were like Dallas, but they don't want to be like Dallas. And people in Dallas wish they could be as chill as people in Fort Worth, but they, it's like, well, no, I can't be that chill because I got to dress up and I got to have a reputation. I got to go to the right clubs. I got to drive the right car.
But the only private clubs are in Fort Worth, like cigar lounges that I've found.
I didn't know there were any private clubs. Fort Worth is devoid of a lot of.
So there's like the Fort Worth Club, which is like a legendary club.
Yeah. I've been there, but they've never asked me to join. I'm not in petroleum or ranching, but I've drawn saddles for those people, so I'm sort of loosely affiliated.
Yeah, so let's dive into this. How did you get your break into art? So obviously you've always loved it. Tell me where you get out of being an art director, running. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, ran a company, right?
Yeah, but I mean that whole gig in New York on 9/11 was one of those wake up calls of, okay, you've done this. And you need to do something else. You don't know what it is. So I decided late in life to go back to grad school and get my master's degree because I had this idea that I wanted to teach on a college level. And at the time, and still is, if you don't have an MFA or whatever the master's degree is, that you can't. You might be able to teach as an adjunct. So I go to the University of Arts in Philadelphia, get my master's degree. The degree's in sculpture, although my thesis year I switched over and started doing 2D work. Because I had to close my shop and put all my, when you build stuff, you have to have tools. All my tools had to go in storage. So I started drawing. And at the time, my thesis in Philly was life-size drawing of naked people. I was really influenced by a sculptor named Ron Muick. And he does these amazing, super realistic sculptures of people. And you would think that you were looking at like you. But usually the size is exaggerated. That's part of his whole narrative, and does extraordinary work. And so I went to my instructor. I said, I can't build stuff, so I think I want to take and do something like Ron Muick, but I can't make them. And he says, well, why don't you paint them or draw them? I said, okay. So I did. So that was what I did my thesis year. And when you study the human body, and I wanted to take and replicate not a glamorous sort of Greek ideal, I wanted to replicate a real person and all the bumps and bruises and scars, and because that has history. I mean, the Japanese call it wabi-sabi. It's the gaining of character through experience. And so a teacup that's brand new is not nearly as cool as a teacup's got cracks in it. It's a little chip because a teacup with cracks has seen life. So I wanted to draw people like that, and that's what my thesis was about. So I finished my thesis, and I decided that I'm done with the Northeast. Marriage kind of went by the side, and it was time for me to take and close a chapter on that. So I moved back to Texas. And when I get back here, I go, okay, I've been drawing these life-size naked people. I don't know if that's going to be too marketable in Fort Worth, Texas. Fort Worth's a little conservative. It's getting better, but I don't know the gallery scene anywhere in Fort Worth that is going to take and put a life-size picture up of a big, hairy, fat white guy. And so we have a lot of rodeos over there, and there was one exhibition that was a cutting horse show, and they've got a exhibition center that's filled with horse trailers and horse tack and everything horse that you can imagine. And they had these really cool saddles. Some of them were just work saddles, and some were like show saddles, and they're all blinged out with silver and stuff. I went, oh, those are fascinating. And a saddle has the same sort of history that human skin does. It's got scratches and blemishes, and if you actually look at the saddle, you can figure out what work was done on that saddle or what it was designed for. And so I think I'll start drawing saddles. So there were a couple of retail shops. One was Teskey's, and they had a retail store that was kind of near where I was staying, and they had saddles that were just floor displays because the guy named Michael Teskey, they've got a store out in Weatherford, and he's got a saddle collection of like 300 saddles. Because people come in, they say, here's my old saddle. I want a new one. And here, I don't want this one anymore. And some people would bring in, this is my grandfather's show saddle. We don't know what to do with it. So he's got this range of really cool historic saddles. I go to museums. There's a J.P. Bryant Museum in Galveston, and he's got a collection of like 200 saddles. So I photograph a lot of them. And I drew a couple. And they became kind of these... I'm known as a saddle guy now. I don't want that title, but it's what I draw. And the way I draw them is unlike anybody else draws them because there's not It's not a saddle on a horse. It's not a saddle with cowboys all around. It's just the saddle. And it highlights the craftsmanship and the detail that goes into each and every one, because a saddle is a lot like a custom shoe. So the saddle maker will ask you what kind of horse you ride and ask all the dimensions of the horse. So the saddle actually has to be built to fit the horse as well as fit to build what you do. So if you're a cowboy that is working in the highlands of West Texas or East Texas, wherever there's hills, your saddle is designed differently because the seat is deeper and the butt part is rounder, so that when you're riding up a hill, you don't fall off the back of the saddle. Well, if you're riding where you do a lot of roping and you got to get out of the saddle quick, the seat will be flatter and it won't be as big, so you can just roll out of the saddle and go do your bulldog thing. And so it's the more I studied about saddles and who made them, and the guys who made the Hollywood saddles for the Roy Rogers people and all those kind of things, it really became fascinating. So although that's my day job, that's what I do, that's probably my primary income, it's really an ongoing education, because every saddle I just found a place in Oklahoma that's got a Wild Bill Cody saddle. And so I'm going to see if I can get into photograph that, see if it,
So process, find cool saddle.
Yeah.
Photograph it. Recreate it.
Well, the way I photograph it is I take an overall and then I take little individual details and then I photo stitch all that together in Photoshop. So I create the ideal in focus saddle, or I create things that are out of focus, so that a stirrup that's behind another one will be soft and fuzzy. So my drawings wind up, although they're incredibly detailed where the line of focus is supposed to be, there are things that I make soft and fuzzy, so they become like three-dimensional. And then my drawings of other stuff, skulls and weird stuff.
And you're spending 3 to 4 months on these.
Yeah.
And they're the size of this table. Or
bigger.
Or bigger. In some cases, you'd want 30-foot wide, you said?
30-foot long, yeah.
How big is your studio?
Well, the studio I'm in now is not as big as your house. A collector up in Bozeman, Montana, who's got 2 of my saddle drawings, moved up there, built a big ranch, and he said, I've got a house, and I don't want to rent it or mothball it. Artists, we're great at barter, and so we don't have a lot of money. We don't make a lot of money. We make art, but we rely on the graciousness of people who like our art to help us. And so he said, the house is paid for. I don't want to take and rent it. You're welcome to use it if you want to, and we'll just barter a piece of art. So I got a house that I'm working in as a studio. It's bigger than the house I live in. So I was talking to my wife. I said, why don't we live in that house? So we can come and do. So the studio is, I've got a 10-foot wide, 10-foot long, 5-foot wide table. I've got a big painting easel, got some work tables that usually got 5 or 6 projects going all at the same time. And, but the 30-foot drawing, required me to, it was actually my mother-in-law had a condo over in, Highland Park, and she spends the summer in Ruidoso. And so her living room was it was 28 feet wide, and I needed to do a 25-foot wide drawing. And so I built these tables and moved all the furniture out of her. And so I lived at her house while she was in Ruidoso, and I did this big drawing over 3 months. But it was big. I'd have to skinny around one, because I draw on both sides of the table, and I'd have to skinny around by the fireplace to get around to the other side of the table so I could draw over there. We were pretty inventive when it comes to how to figure out. There's a friend of mine who draws the same size kind of drawings. He lives in Pennsylvania, and his studio is 13 feet wide. But he'll draw a 25 or 50-foot long drawing. And so he works on it like a scroll. And so he has this special easel built, and he'll start on it on the left. And as he works, he just works from left to right and draws as he goes until he's finished. So creative. We're creative.
That's so cool.
It's interesting. It's something that I've got more works in my head than I have time to finish. I mean, I'm 65. I'll probably draw another 10 years until I figure out that I want to go grow tomatoes full time, something like that.
Yeah, I just think there's something so cool about people that do things that aren't completed in an hour.
It takes perseverance.
Like I recognize that.
Yeah. And it's counterintuitive, in a culture that we're like immediate. We want immediate gratification, and so that's the standard question is how do you get into a drawing? It's going to take you 4 months to do. And I said, well, I hate it for the first 2 weeks. And I look at it and I go, God, there's just so much more to do, and I'm so not far in the drawing. And it's until I find a little detail. Usually every drawing that I do, I pick some component of it that scares the shit out of me. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Because from one drawing to the next, I forget I'm terrified that I've forgotten how to draw. And it's not until I get into doing it that just becomes like routine. You just learn, how to do it. And so I'm, working on this drawing and working on this drawing. It's not until I hit that little detail or that little nuance that I go, oh man, I love that. And then you get in the rhythm of it. And, I've got a drawing on the table now that I started back in March. It's taken me much longer to take and complete it than I expected because my dad got really sick, and so about 3 months I've been spending time taking care of him and stuff like that. He finally crossed the Rainbow Bridge 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So yeah, but so the collectors are really cool. They said take all the time you need. We understand that family comes first, and so, but 2 weeks ago, we buried him last Wednesday. So Thursday, I was like, oh, got to get back on the drawing table. Got to get it done because I got to have it done before I go to France. And I know the collectors are cool and have patience and all, but they're not going to be cool with me going to Gay Paris as if my commission, where is it done? Where is it? So,
how did you find collectors?
It was tough. It's when you enter into something that is such a high-end item, you don't make many of them. And so the most I could draw if I were really, really applying myself would be 3 to maybe 4 a year. And so you don't want to take and have, 1 million people show up and want it.
Well,
and
yeah, you do, because then you can sell it for $50 million.
Well, I can sell. Yeah, that is a good, but I'm
supply and demand.
But oddly, I'm not motivated by the money. That's probably my Achilles heel is I recognize that my buddy who draws those things up in Pennsylvania, he says, you got to charge way more for what you're doing, dude, because I'm doing the same. I'm not as good as you, or I'm as good as you, and I'm $150,000 is my starting point. And I went, I just don't have the balls to ask that money right now.
But if Elon Musk showed up and was like, I want a spaceship.
I just had a executive from Nike call me yesterday. He said, I'm interested in having me do one saddle. I know this guy has got boatloads of money, but it's kind of like I have this. Maybe you can give me a lesson of how to take and grow have the chutzpah to go, okay, I know I was charging this much for the same thing, and I'm going to charge this guy 8 times as much because I can. Because I just have, I know what I do, and the price tag that I put I know how long it takes me to draw them. And I go, I feel guilty about asking this much for it, but I know that, nobody else can do this, and it's one of a kind. I shouldn't feel that way, but I'm not there in my head yet.
Yeah, because that's all it is your head. It's just a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
That's how, when we first started building websites, when it's just me, I charged like $1,000, and I was terrified to tell somebody $1,000.
Yeah.
And now it's like we hop on the call, and I'm like if it's like our project started at $10,000.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
But wasn't it just terrifying the first time you said, okay, I'm not gonna ask them for $1,000. I'm going to ask them for $3,000.
Yeah.
And you put it out there, and you go, you're waiting for that, $3,000. That's a lot. And they come back, okay, that'd be fine. That was actually much better than we expected. And it's like, wow, that was easy. And so I'm gradually getting to that point. I'm getting people that are helping me with that.
This is the key. The key is markup to markdown.
Okay. What does that mean?
That means that you can go and you look, they started at $100,000. I had somebody cancel. Well, you said they started at $100,000. Would that work?
Yeah.
You wait for that reply. And then they go, well, I have a $50,000 budget, a $70,000 budget. And you go, well, if you could wait 6 months, I have a spot opened up and I could do it for 70.
Are you going to send me a consulting fee for this little bit of wisdom? Because that's really all it is. That's the Woody is my buddy in Pennsylvania, and he said it's just perception. He said art is the last bastion of indiscriminate, subjective, conspicuous consumerism. He said people spend tons of money on crap art because it's the trend of the day. It's the artist du jour, and they're producing either really great work or they're producing just crappy stuff. It's like,
how many hours does it take you?
300 to 400.
Okay.
So I know what my hourly rate is, and then I have to figure in is if because there's always a commission involved. If you're represented by somebody, they're getting part of that. So by the time it gets down to it, I'm not making the money that I would be making if I was a plumber, but I'm making money that's making me happy, and maybe next year I'll be making money that makes me happy and actually allows me to put windows in my house or something like that.
So look at it from a different angle. If you charge $250,000 a piece, how much more free time would you have when you only have at maximum, 40 summers left?
I wouldn't have any more time left. I'd have a lot more money to take and do what I wanted to do.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying because you only have 35 summers left.
Right.
I do everything like annually like that. Like I have I don't know, 20 more Thanksgivings left. I have, if you put things in that perspective, it changes.
If you put in that equation of, well, I actually have that many, we don't know that.
Yeah.
And so, so the great thing about an artist's work is as soon as it becomes scarce, as soon as I die, I told the value of my collectors, I said, you can easily take and triple, quadruple, 10 times what you spent on that piece, and that's what it'll be worth because I won't be making anymore.
Yeah.
And that's just the way the art world works, is scarcity creates wealth. But I'd kind of like to be around.
I think you should do your whole brand around, I do 4 pieces a year, they're $100,000 a piece, and leave it right there. No question. I don't conversate. I don't go back and forth. This is where it's at.
Where it's at? Okay. I don't know if I'll be able to adopt that right away. I'll have to go and have a couple tequila shots to
then,
be there.
Like for example, there's a ex-NFL player.
But don't you have to have a demand on your product? I mean, I'm not at the point now that people are beating down my door. It happens that when I'm finishing up one, another magically appears like a unicorn. And it's like, wow, I was, worrying about what was going to happen.
So
next.
You have a portfolio, and that's all you need. You
Yeah,
don't need demand. You need a portfolio.
Yeah.
Because
I have a portfolio.
A portfolio is what drives demand. There's an ex-NFL player that just started a company called One of One, and they only sell one of one products.
Really?
And that would be a great one that you should reach out to.
I should be in touch with that young man.
And I found out about it because Blake Jamison was, of course, in touch.
Okay, yeah. Blake is interesting. I have this. I'm hoping that young artists take and Blake's got a great gig. I mean, I don't disparage. I'm not throwing shade at him. But we have to realize as people that we're not making anything that hasn't been made before. And I'm hoping that Blake looks at an artist called Leroy Neiman. And Leroy, he's passed away now, but in the 80s when I was playing ball, he was the Blake of the era. And so he worked with the Michael Jordans and his style was like side by side. It's like, man, these guys both tapped into this beautiful market because these guys have more money they know what to do with. And you're making something that takes and feeds their ego. It's like, would you like a landscape? No, I want a shot of me, hitting a home run. Oh, you sure don't want to I do special in landscape? No. I want me touchdown or 3-pointer.
Do you want to go see Blake in like a couple weeks?
Where's he going to be?
He'll be in New York City.
Maybe, yeah.
So
how am I going to get there?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking. I was you, Greg, and maybe another artist, and me would all fly in New York and stay with him and spend like a weekend there. Is what I was thinking.
Weekend?
Yeah. So it'd be like 3 days. We'd get in on a Friday, leave on a Sunday.
That might be cool. I have to run this by corporate because I'm trying to get my act together to go to France for 3 months. So let me get back to you on that. I mean, it's an offer that's like, oh man, that'd be too cool to pass up.
Well, I love the collaborations that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
And the conversations, I just think it'd be a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, his whole personality is just like badass. It's like, I'm going to be in MoMA in 90 days. Like, where did you come up with that stoner idea? Because nobody does that. I said, well, the definition of being in MoMA, I didn't actually say, that, but I'm going to work towards that. And I thought that was the most brilliant part of his whole story was he had this idea and he went and did it. And he, figured out how to just take, and like you, the rules don't apply to me. I don't know why I can't just walk in there with a paper bag full of art and say, hey, I want to see your head curator, because nobody does that.
Yeah.
Nobody in the regular art world approaches it like that, because we've all been told, no. They got to talk to you. They got to ask you for that kind of, you have to be granted that sort of audience. It doesn't work the other way around. But he just said, nah.
But see, if they're obsessed with you, the rules don't apply.
Right.
And that's why everything comes down to relationships.
Well, the whole side gig of that project, that was the brilliant component of that whole thing, is the backstory about that. Whether he actually got into MoMA and his works were actually put on the wall was secondary to the whole brilliance of documenting it and going through the process, because that builds brand behind what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so the gigs that he's now associated with, it's not just he had balls and went to, make this insane idea that you're going to put work in MoMA, but you actually went through the process and shared it with all the folks. And so now all the people who love that sort of, devil may care, stick-to-itness, that's the thinking that's what you're really marketing. And so that was really an admirable. That's the Mentalist, all the shows that you've had on, all the people you've had on. It's such a broad category of people, and I'm going, how did he pick that guy? Or the girl who's the daughter of the polygamist.
I know.
What is that? Polygamy.com? You look that up and see who's going to take and be interested.
Yeah, I don't know. You got to find interesting people, and I work really hard at that. I'm real pumped to see Olympic basketball.
Are you?
See, I love when people dominate. I mean,
but I didn't think you were into sports. I thought you were not a sports. I know you're not a movie guy, which I can't imagine in America how you cannot be.
I'm not really a sports guy either, but I love domination of anything. I love people that are the best at what they do. It's why you're here right now. Like, I'm obsessed. Like, if I had 25, I'm like right now thinking, I have a guy offered me 20 grand for the truck. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, should I just sell that truck and commission a piece before that guy steps in?
No, it's one of a kind. You gotta have it.
But I'm seriously, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, man, should I just sell the truck and commission a piece right now? And then I'm thinking
25 grand?
This whole time.
No, I can only do 4 a year. Started 100 grand. Sorry, that's over.
And so, yeah, I'm like, man, I was surprised myself.
And you were going, no, I don't want you to adopt that principle now. No.
You should. It's okay. And then I was thinking, like, man, should I just have you do a giant White House? I think is what I would have you do. And then I'm hanging in my living room.
A giant White House.
Like the White House.
Oh, the White House.
With a dope American flag coming out the lawn.
Maybe. See, and that's
as good as you are at 3D, think about a White House. That'd be a cool painting. Never done one like it.
No, and I'd want to do it life size, so you don't have a big enough living room to do it. I mean, the works that I do, I've gotten to the point in my life that I don't do things that I don't want to do. I mean, I've thought about it. There's a couple of things that I started to go down that route. A collector will call me and say, I want to have this done or when that done. That rifle was one of those projects that I was on the fence about. And if the subject matter or the story behind it or the person is not intriguing to me enough to have me emotionally involved in the project, then I'll do it. I mean, it's like, I want you to take in, there was a guy who approached me and I want you to do me, I'm standing holding a rifle and I've got my, my stuffed bear behind me and I thought, there's nothing about that composition that I'm digging at all. It's like, are you going to be naked? Give me something that I'm really interested in, because none of that is like blowing my hair back. And
it's one of those things of, I haven't been around a lot of ultra rich people. I've been around a couple though.
You are an ultra rich person.
Well,
let me put it this way. You're much richer than I am, because you can do this kind of thing, and you got a company and a bunch of other stuff. So people like me is like, I don't know why I'm sitting around this table with this guy, because
I make a living. I'm good at, again, everything.
He had a picture of Elon Musk in here. I don't know why Elon's not sitting around here. Maybe he's busy.
Everything is that I'm just good at marketing and advertising. That's what it comes down to. So with that being said, I've only been around a couple ultra rich people, and most of them have dumb toys, as I like to call them. Like things they spend an insane amount of money on.
Right.
And that's what I can.
Like a rocket ship.
Well, no, you were saying like a guy that wants a photo of him with a beer behind him and a rifle.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's one of those things where you go to the guy's house and he's showing you all the cool shit he's done, and he's like, "This painting right here, $100,000." And you're just like, it's stupid though.
Yeah, why did you spend $100,000 on that? I mean, I'm not an art critic, and I can't throw shade at any other artist, because if he got $100,000 for that, damn. But and that's an interesting take on, I guess, the last couple of days, Jeff Bezos, flies off into space in his phallus-looking rocket ship, which, dude, your designers have got to come up with something that looks something less like a dildo, please. But, how much money was spent on that project? And I know that their idea is they're going to take and create this space tourism industry, and theoretically it's going to create all these jobs and stuff. But, I mean, it's not something that I'm going to take and drop, I don't know. One of the seats was $2.5 million for is either the Richard Branson trip or who has that kind of money to take and just, I answer my own question, rhetorical question. There are lots of people that have that kind of disposable income, and by all means, do what you want to with it. As long as you throw some of that cash my way, I'm golden. But let me take and do a mural on the side of that big dildo. They can decorate that mouth out. But anyway, yeah, Rich, I have to recognize that sometimes the shade that I throw are the people who are my customer base, and I got to be really careful about how nonchalant I get about being dismissive of big corporations and high income. I mean, this guy from Nike that contacted me, he's just way cool, and I wouldn't know that he was this guy unless the person who turned me on to him said, "Well, that's who's going to call you tomorrow."
Some of the most generous, nicest people you ever meet will also be some of the wealthiest.
Mm-hmm.
And me, who grew up in a non-wealthy family and I guess was envious of wealthy people, thought that they must all just be terrible and snobby and greedy.
Well, do you think that's because it's the difference between old money that's earned it? I mean, I think the process of how you acquire that money either makes you pretentious or it makes you human.
So I have a friend who I want to say his name, but I won't, whose dad has done incredibly well, and he's never really had to work a day in his life. And he's the nicest guy ever.
Well, good.
I mean, just everywhere we go, he tips $100. Like, he just has no idea of money and the value. It's just like, it just exists.
But he's willing to share it.
Yeah.
With people who, clearly don't have that. $100 tip in a night is probably the person going home weeping.
Yeah. And so I sometimes meet that. It seems to be that greedy people, whether they got it themselves or they inherited it, if they're greedy is when they're the worst.
So it's part of genetics. I mean, the way you are, whether you're rich or whether you're poor, that's the way you're going to be.
Yeah, I think it's because I think it's all about if somebody's greedy or not. Because if you think about a poor, greedy person and how they act, it's outrageous.
Well, when you say poor, so I've had some remarkable experiences with homeless folks. I mean, I worked a couple years part-time for the Ternary Food Bank, and they had a community garden, and the whole process was to help people learn how to take and garden, how to grow your own food if you want to, learn more about the environment, composting, all that sort of stuff. But it was in an area of town that is clearly a depressed economic area. And so there were a lot of homeless encampments there. And some of the people were clearly mentally disturbed, and they needed some help. But there were some people that were they were just down on their luck. There was one veteran guy that I met, and he was a decorated Vietnam vet, and he'd been in and out of shelters and stuff. But he said to me, I don't know if you realize it, but 70% of Americans are one paycheck away from being me. And he said, it's a tough break in one way, or it's, you know, a bad decision. You know, he said, I got a drug problem. It was related to, you know, opioids because I got injured in, you know, Vietnam, and I just, you know, it's wrecked my life, but I'm responsible for it. But he was probably the most caring and generous person, even though he was in this position of, I don't have anything to give, but if I have it, you can have half of it. And I've been really trying to figure out how somebody who has nothing can give half of the nothing away and be completely cool with it. Compared to people who, you know, got lots and lots and hold on to it like it's, you know, dear life.
It's all about whether you believe in abundance or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the issue. I spend my time begging people to make intros for me. If I'm just honest.
Right.
Hey, I noticed that you're working this event. This event is going to have people there whose phones are going to die. We'd love to put these kiosks there for free and then give you half the revenue they produce.
Right.
Well, sorry. Yeah, I just need you to make an intro. I don't know anything about, like, I haven't, you know, like, I don't want to use my intro. I'm like, you're just making, it's going to make you look better. You're making an intro to a guy that's going to solve their problem for free and pay them.
So how do you take in and decipher who's a compassionate, empathetic person who's more likely to respond to your request for an intro and the one who's just an asshole and it's not going to take and give you the time of day or the intro just because it's his little power play? I mean, is there a little magic trick you have for figuring that out?
I try to educate people. So I try to say, like, I try to explain to people that you're going to be the one that benefits most.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say I have a friend who needs a deck built. And I introduce him to a friend that builds his deck, and he does an awesome job.
Right.
My friend goes, man, Nathan knows all the right people.
Well, that's building a relationship.
And then I make an intro to the guy, and the guy builds a terrible deck. My friends know, hey, well, I vetted the guy. I'm just as disappointed. They might call me. I'm like, oh, man, I hate to hear that, right? Mm-hmm. But that very, very rarely happens because the person...
you don't recommend somebody who's going to do a crappy job.
Or, you know, I mean, sometimes you just don't know, but you just trust, right? Yeah. And you tell people that. I had Ozone on, who's like a graffiti artist here, and my friend Jonathan post, I don't know, 2 days after I have him on, hey guys, I need a mural artist by like next week.
Right.
Because for his like company launch party. And so I like start a group text, Jonathan, here's your mural artist. He can knock it out. He knocks it out.
It's relationship building. I mean, and the world revolves around that. I think it works best when the relationship is not built on what you can do for me, but what I can do for you.
Yeah. And
as long as it's that giving, it comes back to you. I mean, that whole idea of, you know, what you give back comes back to you in you know, triple fold. I've discovered is really true. You know, when I get really antsy and tense and holding on to, you know, I don't want to give anything away. I find that this just gets in my way, as opposed to, you know, I give a lot of stuff away. If you are a person that I really like and you're in my studio and you go, oh, that's really, really cool, you might get it. Just because when I moved from Massachusetts to here, I'd built probably a dozen different sculptures, and sculptures are, until somebody acquires them, they're a storage problem. They're not art, they're a storage problem. And so I knew I was moving back to Texas. I was tired of storing these things. I couldn't get anybody to show the work because I just wasn't hooking up with the right people. So I did a thing on Facebook, and I said, if you write me a one-page essay about why you like this work, and I like the essay, then you can have it. And I gave away 12 pieces of art. And I felt really good about it because the person who responded, there may be 4 people who wrote about the piece of art, but one said, you know, I used to do this when I was a kid. It reminds me of, you know, when I'm climbing trees, and whatever their story was, it was, you know, it was touching. And some of those people have come back, you know, they circle back around, and you know, I know a collector that might be interested in your stuff. It's that process of send it out there.
It's open hand.
Open hand.
I mean, it's because that is the thing. It's people that win are people that understand that abundance exists in everything.
I was listening to a it's on the abundance topic. And I think as Americans, we've been sold this idea that there's not enough of anything. It doesn't matter what it is. When it comes to money, you got to hold on to it. You got to invest it right. And he was at the time the second wealthiest man in the world. He was Japanese, I think. I can't remember what his name was. But he was interviewed, and he was asked the secret to his wealth, and he said, "I'm just wealthy today." He said, "Somebody else will be wealthy tomorrow. Money is transient. It takes and merely moves from my pocket to somebody else's. Today, I have big pockets. Tomorrow, somebody else will have bigger pockets." And that's how I work. I said, I can't hold on to it. I can't think I'm going to take it with me. And so for me to take and make good investments, that's just the way it is. And I think if you approach life that way, as there's plenty of everything. There's plenty of friendship. There's plenty of love. There's plenty of compassion. There's plenty of hate. There's plenty of, but all those negative things are based in, fear or, think that there's not enough of anything. It's hard to do. It's hard to do when you're surrounded in a society like we are to take and do that. Oh man, I wish you wouldn't have said that. It was really pissing me off, but just gotta let it go, And I'm the worst. It's like my wife said, "Don't get on Facebook. Don't do it. Don't do it. Get you on trouble." No. Anyway.
Yeah, because Facebook is not this is where good conversations happen because we have several hours to hash things out. Like I had the ladies on from the Pan African bookstore.
Yeah.
And we severely disagree on everything. And I quoted real data and real facts, and she didn't want to hear it.
I started listening to that one, and I got about half an hour in, then I had to go do something else. But I'll tune back into that to try to feel that out.
And all it was that we just had, I was okay with her not wanting to hear it. At the end of the day, that's the place to have it.
Right.
Because
I remember there was one of the statements that you made that you got, I guess, blowback on social media about it was kind of the equivalent of somebody saying all lives matter. I'm not paraphrasing it right. And I made that statement when the Black Lives Matter thing came out, and it was good. It was made in good intentions.
Yeah.
But it was then misdirected to, no, you're taking something away from us. Or, from our
so
cause.
I never, my thing is always about business.
Yeah.
Because business is what I'm most passionate about. So the big statement I made that I got a lot of blowback on was that all businesses matter. So there was this big push for Black-owned businesses.
Well, there is, because the pendulum is, and it rightly should be for a while, in their court.
And so I'm saying, and during a pandemic, when people are just trying to survive, and you're sitting there like, who's got a Black business I can support? We should support good businesses. So the statement I made is that good businesses that are small local businesses should be supported.
Right.
And to be
and irregardless of what the skin color of the person who owns it. It's a good business, local, support it.
Yeah, and I think how I ended it, I said, would it be odd if I said go support this white-owned business? And if the answer is yes, then doesn't it feel just as odd to say go support this Black-owned or this Asian-owned? To me, we should just focus on good businesses and supporting good businesses because that's how economy works. Economy works that this person does a good job. They make good bread, I buy their bread.
Right.
But the second it goes, I buy their bread because they're Black.
Or they're Jewish, or they're Christian, or they're whatever. But that's putting that's painting the business with the precepts of one person's business is better than another person's business because of their ethnicity. Well, if it's owned by some Egyptians and it's an Egyptian restaurant, I'm thinking that their food's probably going to be pretty good because it comes from a base of knowledge. If it was a couple of Irish guys who were doing an Egyptian restaurant, I'd go eat there, but I'd be more curious about how did you guys decide to take and do baba ganoush? Why did you think that you're from Kent and you're making baba ganoush? Why did you think that would be a good idea? It's really good baba ganoush, by the way. But artists, the art world is very much like that. I mean, I think, and my ego-driven thoughts is that I picked the worst time in history to be a heterosexual older white artist. Because if you're LGBT, if you're female, if you're Asian, if you're Black, if you're gay, whatever, you have more, a feminist, you have more chances of getting audience with the people who make those decisions than me, average white guy, walking in.
Yeah.
And it's like you would, orchestras have had a huge blowback on, who gets first violin and stuff. And it was, a male violinist was 90% more likely to be put in that position. And it's so, it's based in decades or centuries of processes that we don't even know that are working, superiority kind of things that make us judge one person versus another when we really should be judging on what they do or what they give, as opposed to what church they belong to or what color skin they are or who they're married to. Those are secondary things that certainly color the giving part, but we live in America. I mean, and it is what it is. I'm hoping it's moving to a more inclusive melting pot.
I think it's all we are is dividing. I think we're more inclusive. Like I think the media has too much pull on everything. Like people are letting the media, and I talk about this every podcast, but we're letting the media decide whether we like each other, whether there's hate, whether there's violence. We're letting people decide this.
100%.
And that's not who decides that. We the people decide that. And my big push has been on American excellence. And so what we have lost, my generation, but more Gen Z, they've lost a reverence for how amazing America is. And this is the outcome of that.
Well, I would propose that we, since the 1950s, adopted this credo that we're the best in the world.
And that's what took us to the moon.
We do the best everything, and that's what took us to the moon.
Yeah.
And it was like Blake going, I'm going to go to the moon. Well, how are you going to get there? I don't know. I'm going to strap some rockets on my butt, and I'm going to put myself in a tin can, and we're going to go to the moon.
Yeah.
And you did it. And you look at the advances that we have made, and it's truly remarkable. In the terms of a better America or a better quality of life, I think we've lost a little bit. I think the way we
your father and my grandfather, that's my goal.
Okay.
That's who I want to be.
Okay.
That generation that said we don't care about feelings.
Yeah.
We love our country. We take care of our families.
Okay.
We put food on the table, whether it's cleaning out a sewage or working at an appliance shop or whatever the case is.
Right.
And people had these grand visions. When you look at a 65 Cadillac and that thing is twice the size of my garage, you think somebody had some vision there.
Right. Right.
And so that's American excellence. And it's driven by this pride of what we've done and what we're becoming and where we're going.
That's a great goal. I mean, that's in terms of the refocusing on gaining those things. Statistically, we've lost some ground, and largely, I think because we've allowed systems to remove the ways of getting there. I mean, so
we've stopped thinking big. I really think that's what it comes down to.
Well, have we stopped thinking big, or have we stopped building the mechanisms to allow people to get there? And in terms of the American dream of owning your own house and, a car in the garage and your kids have a good life and good education, whether they go to college or not, all those sorts of things are mechanisms. But if we have not looked at the human infrastructures that allow us to get from point A to point B and really support those sorts of things, and I'm not talking about social programs, I'm talking about building a way of looking at life that builds a better fabric for everybody. I think we would see a solving of a lot of problems that currently we just want to throw money at to solve. And, when...
the problem is it's not you and I throwing money at things. It's the government who's not able to do anything well.
Yeah, well, I heard that that tweaked me a little bit, but I agree with you, but I ask, okay, without a quasi-dysfunctional government in place, leaving it all up to corporations, we've done that in certain circumstances, and we know that
The problem is we haven't. What has happened is the corporations have bought the politicians to decide the policies.
yes, right.
And that is
And if the policy,
that is crony capitalism, which is just as bad as socialism.
I agree 100% with that. Now, how do we take and modify that dynamic so that the corporations who are influencing the politicians are not influencing it for their own profit and personal gain, but share the wealth? How do you take and set up a system? I mean, I look at Bill Gates and the Melinda Gates Foundation, and I don't follow all that they do. I'm sure that they're doing, great things for lots of different people. Bezos is another one. It was an enormous faux pas for him to finish up his flight into outer space, and then the debriefing in the press debriefing, he says, "I want to thank all of my employees and all of the people who are customers of Amazon because you paid for this." And I thought, okay, that's a factual information, but why does that make me feel better about you getting in a rocket, sending yourself to outer space as an ego thing? I mean, why, if you were taken and put back into your employees and you're back into programs that you could, that benefit the general public as much as I love Amazon Prime. I mean, I'm one of those is like, oh, okay, do I buy local? Do I order it on, well, it's 6 of one, half dozen another. Depends on how busy I am. My personal edict is buy local. Go get it at the store. Go get it. If you can get it local, do it because that helps everybody. Anyway, my question is how do we build the mechanisms so that Americans have faith in a system that is going to allow them to achieve those sorts of things?
So it's around complete transparency.
Yeah.
So right now, when something bad happens, the government has this thing, whether it's Trump or Obama or Bush, where they go, we're just going to kind of cover this up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And any good leader takes ownership and takes responsibility. So when you look at the food pyramid, which was influenced by Monsanto,
right.
It was nothing to do with health. It was not like doctors did not sign off on it. Instead of them saying, hey guys, actually we took a bribe to print this, and this is why there's a lot of obesity and there's a lot of unhealthiness. Right. It's actually because your government took a bribe from this company. And the penalties for this is, no money can ever fix this. This is that our government that you trust in the greatest country the world's ever known messed up.
Right.
So it starts with starting to be transparent and honest about things.
So where does that start? Because if you trace you play the blame game, do you blame the corporation? Do you blame the Monsanto or the Domino sugar? The sugar industry that was created, and Frosted Flakes and Trix and all that was because, we need more sugar in our diet. Nobody ever looked at, okay, what happens if you drink a Coca-Cola that actually has 12 spoonfuls of sugar in a glass, and what happens to your body when that, nobody went. Now, I like Coca-Cola, but when I know what it does to my system, that's bad.
Yeah.
But the transparency part is Coca-Cola is not going to go, okay, well, yeah, we know that's bad, so we're not going to do that anymore.
So yeah, it's the transparency part is you're a corporation, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Should you though?
You shouldn't, but if you want to do bad things, you should be able to do bad things. It's a free country. That's what America's founded on. And I think that the market will decide that we don't want anything to do with you, and there you'll go away. Maybe they won't decide that.
No, I think that's a quasi-naive approach too, because we understand that capitalism is driven by profits, and profits are what motivate people to make either good decisions or bad decisions. Until we motivate corporations to make better decisions, otherwise you will not see the benefits, and that gets into regulation. Who's going to take and make a corporation do the right thing? Who's going to do that? And if it means it's going to cost them more money.
Yeah, and then you have to define what is right is the problem.
Right.
And so, again, my thing is just, it starts with these small moves of saying, hey, we took a bribe here and we made it like this. That was wrong. Hey, we deleted every single post from March on that mentioned that COVID came from a lab. And now looking at the data, that was wrong. Like, we prohibited free speech, but also, let's say it did come from a lab. We jumped the gun on something that wasn't proven, that there was no DATs, there was no fats on. We messed up.
But you're not factoring in the concept of cognitive dissonance and the idea that I bought into something so completely based on intransparency of something that somebody just made up. And now for me to take and change my point of view on that is going to take and make me look bad. So the number of people who take the origin of COVID, it doesn't matter where it came from. Came from pigs, came from bats, came from a lab. I mean, it is what it is. And if we don't take and drop all the pretense of whose fault it was and deal with the issue, it's not, I mean, they've already said it's not going away. We're going to be able to take and manage it, but it's not going away. You're going to have the Rand Pauls who are having, pissing matches in Congress with Dr. Fauci about whether it actually came from a lab or not. Okay, let's put that argument aside. Where it came from a lab, whose responsibility it was, we'll do that later. Somebody screwed up. China should have admitted that it was a problem way before they did, but they didn't. And so it came in, and it's now global for us to say, oh, it's, only the young people don't get it. The virus is going, hold my beer.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get on a soapbox about things.
Well, the only thing I would say there is it's very important to hold people accountable that we entrusted that did not
accountability. You hit it right on the head. Is accountability.
Do what they said. And so when I look at why it's so important that Rand Paul challenges Dr. Fauci at every single hearing, it's because Dr. Fauci is the one who directed $4 million of funding from a U.S. lab to that lab in China for gain of research that had been banned and he was not allowed to do.
Right, and I'm not. That's all that transparency stuff. If one person comes clean, everybody needs to come clean. And so for us to debate critical race theory, it means that America is going to have to recognize and embrace that America was built on the backs of labor, of impoverished labor. The Pilgrims didn't come over here because it was a pleasure cruise. They didn't take, the merchant guy who's got the merchant ship and says, come to the new world. Well, how am I going to get there? It takes 3 months. And, what's a ticket? Well, it'll be 5 years of indentured labor, and then I'll give you 40 acres and a mule. I made that part up. But, it was basically, you can come to the new world and I'll give you a new start, but you need to work for me. So the founders of the country come over here and they try to take and, hey, Indian people, why don't you come over here and do our hard labor for us? And the Indian people said, no, fuck you, man. I'm going to take my turkey and go home. So instead of taking and trying to work with them, we take and massacre all of them, and we import a whole bunch of new folks, either Chinese or Irish or blacks, or we build a nation on labor that is unrepresented or disadvantaged. And it's if we look at the issue with immigration, we've built a system, an agricultural industry that's based on undocumented or underdocumented labor. The entire industry in California would collapse if all of the farmers who are hiring all the people to pick the strawberries and the lettuces had to pay them $15 an hour. They wouldn't and couldn't do it because we've built the infrastructure that supports people coming in who live in a trailer and they work all day long for $3. So how can you unravel all of that and have the people who built that system say, okay, we have to do things different? That's the part where I don't understand, is how we unravel all of the things that built this great country and really embrace what it took to do it. There were lots of great things that happened, but we also did a lot of really great bad things. And for us to recognize that those bad things happened, you were commenting, we made this bad decision and we built this food pyramid on false information, and we had people adopt it, and now everybody believes that the food pyramid's like that. It's nothing like that. It was all built on a fib. We're sorry about the fib. Okay, fine. How do we undo that? How do we disconnect all those people who believe that, well, I got to eat all these basic food groups, and sugar and beer is in there somewhere. Yeah. It's a primary food group in my categories. So I would love America to be the country that it used to be. I'm not sure what that ever was.
So I think that social media actually helps with unraveling a lot.
Does it?
Yeah, because what social media does is it spreads information very quickly.
But
a lot of this is an education issue. And if people want to ignore something after they know it, that's fine. But you can look at like Dr. Amen, for example, who's does brain scans. That's his specialty. He's done like 200,000 brain scans in his life, or 100,000, some insane number. And he's said like, hey, people that smoke marijuana, like they age quicker than anybody else except for methamphetamine users or something crazy. Like he's just been able to put together all these things, like their brains age, not talking about facially.
Right.
And he's like, so we have to like, and I'm a guy, I don't smoke, but I'm a guy that's this way too. We act like it doesn't matter, but it actually like if you do brain scans on it, it's real crazy. And his brain scans is like, hey, we have like lots of cancers that are linked to alcohol because our body looks at alcohol as a poison.
Right.
And so if most people don't know that, now if they know that and want to do nothing about it, that's fine.
Right.
And so I think that when you look at, food pyramid was wrong, here's the right one. Mm-hmm. The power of social media is the power to push out, here's what the correct one looks like.
Okay, so then who puts the title on, okay, this is the authority? And that becomes a question of making up your own reality of, I think Kellyanne Conway's, the worst thing to do is say there are alternative facts, because it gave the license for anybody, whatever you believed, that's fact. It's your fact. It's your reality. Well, I don't think the world is flat. You might think it's flat, but there's scientific proof and data, and people have gone out and space. No, that's all faked. They made all that up. So that idea of we can take and we have to figure out who are those authorities, who make those rules, and how to get people who think the earth is flat to recognize that, well, maybe I need to modify my perception. For people to unthink the idea that the food pyramid is the way we should formulate our diet. All of those, the consumerism in America is built on principles of profit. And so if you look at, it's actually illegal in France to throw away more than, I think, 10% of produce. I mean, they've got a ugly fruit, a whole industry that's, the perfect banana. There's a whole, lots of stores. You can go get an unperfect banana because they don't throw out all the stuff that we throw out. If it's not Central Market perfect, and I'm not throwing shade at Central Market because I love buying a grapefruit the size of a basketball, but that they create markets for profit and feed that profit but the waste that goes into it is enormous. And how do we unplug that? How do we unplug a profit in a business is important, but obscene profit is not necessary. If you're going to make a shit ton of money doing what you're doing, figure out how to take and distribute that so that that you're putting more back into the community or into the society than you're taking out of it. And I'm an older guy who looks at the corporate structure and is I don't have a very high opinion of the big corporations with lots of the public owned companies, because they're guided by their shareholders, and they make decisions sometimes that are not based on what's best for the populace, but what's best for their bottom line.
And my response to that would be education fits all of that.
Yes.
If people know, if they know how a publicly company operates, if they know how that, like, hey, how are wars funded? They're funded by banks, or like banks good people or are they bad people? Like, if people are educated on things, and that's why it's like I'm very against censoring any type of speech. Mm-hmm. Because I just believe that education and you'll say the guy that's pushing out the agenda that, the world is flat. Well, that just means we need to do a better job of educating the world on SpaceX videos when they go to space and you can see the curvature of the Earth.
Right. Well, education is the key. And I think one of our forefathers, I can't remember what it was the way to take and dissolve society is to limit education, to limit people's experience.
North Korea.
And and so, but when you've built a society that's a swipe left, kind of immediate gratification, how many of our Americans are actually interested in looking at multiple news sources to take and get their news? I mean, there's a great pyramid that was another pyramid that was done by a political psychologist, and she wanted to look at the different news organizations. I've done a bunch of reading on this lately about how at some point news became biased. It was, I think, 1946. There was a Truth in Something Act that was founded, and then when Reagan came in, they did away with it. So companies could start to advertise and not really tell all the truth. They could tell the truth that was beneficial to them, and news organizations became the same. So you wind up having the Walter Cronkites of my parents' age, and news was news. News was what Walter Cronkite tells me. That's what's happening, and it's not the Fox News version of Walter Cronkite or the Rachel Maddow version of Walter Cronkite. It was factual. Well, now the world is dominated by what I want to believe. What aligns with my personal opinions or my religious beliefs, or it's colored by all these different things, and we gravitate either to one side or the other side.
See, all these problems are solved by great entrepreneurs.
Are they?
Yeah. Because you look at this problem and you think, okay, transparency, factionality, all these types of things, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, okay, cool. I'm going to start a group that we publish just the news. It's non-biased. We source everything if somebody's looking into it, but our pride and joy is non-biased, and we just source news. And
you're going to be the new Walter Cronkite?
When we mess up, I'm not doing this. I'm just saying if I'm not sure.
Okay.
And when we mess up, we own it. We publish it on our homepage, and we even have a dedicated page on our website to our mess up, so that everything's documented when we mess up. And because we're doing this, when we talk about how Big Pharma has, a drug has killed a bunch of people and they just paid off a bunch of people, therefore they're not going to want to advertise on our site. The only way for you to be able to access this news is for you to pay us $50 a month. So not the $1 New York Times subscription. Like, it's a high price point.
Right.
And somebody like me goes, that's worth it. $50 a month to have non-biased news delivered and the way I want it delivered, perfect. And so I look at all these problems as solved by good entrepreneurs and education.
And trust that vehicle is not being influenced by those outside sources.
And again, that's a good entrepreneur will do a good job of that. And so that's how I look at most of these problems. And some are, there's always going to be gray area. And that's kind of where things can have problems. Mm-hmm. And so that's just accepting that's part of life, and especially in the communication age, that's part of things. But
I'd pay $50 a month for that.
Yeah,
I mean, it would save me a lot of time from reading The Guardian and the New York Times and Breitbart and forming my own assembly of all these different facts and coming up with something that is moderately close to what's actual reality.
I follow a lady on TikTok, and I think once a week, maybe it's every day. Yeah, I think it's every week. She goes, here's 3 stories the mainstream media isn't talking about. And so this week, I saw it today, it might have been last week, might have been 2 weeks ago, but it's that Biden is on pace to grant more oil drilling licenses than Trump and Obama. Because what happened is that he got in there and then gas prices skyrocketed. And they were continuing to skyrocket. And so he was like, okay, before I, and obviously, he's a politician. He's been 50 years, so he just went back on his word. And now he's granting all these things. But again, not reported in the mainstream news.
Right.
Are
you familiar with the Reuters live streaming? Mm-mm. Reuters is in that evaluation of where news organizations fall. They're pretty centrist, and they've got a great live streaming thing that is basically you can tune in for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and then they have regular programs that you can read up. But every morning I come in and have my cup of coffee and and my breakfast, and I tune in for the 15 minutes, and it covers national stuff, but it also covers international stuff. So you'll hear about the issues in Haiti and all the dynamics that are happening in that, and the
Africa one's real crazy. I was reading about that this morning.
Well, and then there was a part of a story about Africa. The girls that were on the other day, and they were talking about how was it China?
Yeah,
is so into Africa because all the natural resources. We'd never hear about that in a regular, U.S. news station. Reuters covers some of that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, you should look it up because it's an agency and a resource that seems to be fairly balanced in terms of the content that they. But yes, I agree that I personally want that resource.
And so there's again another problem where a great entrepreneur solves that. If he makes $1 billion, congratulations, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how we got to look at things. Now, what he chooses to do with that money is his own thing, and that's just where I stand. He solved the problem.
As long as he doesn't go out to shoot the last black rhino or white rhino in Africa, because the Jimmy John's guy. I don't know what his bid is. That's just
what
nuts.
Episode did we talk about Jimmy John guy? I just listened to it. I remember.
It might have been Blake. It might have been Blake.
Oh yeah,
Blake's thing.
I don't know. Anyway, I do want to have him on. He doesn't. I don't know. Anyway,
I'm sure he comes off much differently than he's presented in social media.
Yeah, I want to hear the other side of it. I mean, I'm always desperate to hear people's other sides. In 2016, during primaries, I came out very against Trump. Mm-hmm. And my reason for this was everybody is saying they're going to vote for him because we need a businessman. And he's been a terrible businessman. Like, one of his business practices was buying things, not paying the invoices, and being like, oh, you're going to sue me because I have a bunch of lawyers. That was one of his business practices.
No, that's his primary business practice. And I'll come out right now and I'll say, I worked for Don, and Don's approach to business at that time was very similar. And his come from was, I have more lawyers and I can outlast you. And if you wind up settling, he'd do a contract for $1 million for somebody who's going to supply pianos to his casino. And he pays the first $250,000 on the deal. People delivered the pianos, pays a couple of payments, and then he stops paying. Well, now the person who has built the pianos, delivered them, is now going, well, where's my money? And he'll say, well, the pianos weren't like I wanted them to be. I know. He'll basically, but if he winds up settling, even for $650,000 or $700,000,
he saves $300,000.
He saves.
So I come out and I say, hey guys, he's not a good businessman. He's a terrible human. He brags about cheating on his wife in his book. I mean, all these things. And at the same time, I'm able to put all that aside when it's him versus Biden. I'm able to say, hey guys, the reason I'm voting for Trump over Biden was these points.
Okay.
And because I was still terrible human, terrible businessman, but his first 4 years in office, when you follow his actual policies, I liked where things were going. I liked that we were finally fighting against China. Mm-hmm. I liked his $500 billion initiative to help black businesses and black colleges. Far more. I like that he labeled the KKK a terrorist organization, the first president in history to do that.
I'm not arguing that the Trump administration made some good strides. I think those strides were overshadowed with the left side. Let's blow chaos at this guy as much as we can and blow up all of the negatives.
What I'm saying is, I'm a very interesting guy that I looked at just the raw data and facts and presented where I was at with it, and that's so everybody again is like tied to sides, and so anyway,
I'm more tied to policy. I'd like to say that if I were looking at, well, like anything, like looking
but you're
at...
65. That's why you're tied to policy. Well, because you're educated.
I'm not as educated as I'd like to be, but I'm trying. I'm trying to...
When you look at the average 21-year-old, it's about like, oh, Biden has a stray dog that lives at the White House. Like, do you know how many articles I saw? Did you see this articles? I saw so many articles about his dog.
That's because the base, and I identify with a more progressive leaning mindset just because I'm an artist than a conservative mindset. I think conservative politics has a lot of really good policy initiatives, a balanced budget. Don't spend more than you have. I mean, all of the things that conservative values are based on, if you actually executed those, that would be great. But I've got this theory that the country is made up of 100% of people. And there's 10% on this end and 10% on that end that are really, really loud. And they make all this noise that eliminates the other 80% in the middle.
And then in the very middle, there's a 0.5% sliver. And they're the same people, but they fight for each side. Like if you look at Biden and you look at Bush, they're identical people. Actually, Obama and Bush is a better comparison. You look at Obama and you look at Bush, they're identical people. They're funded by different banks. But like Goldman Sachs said, hey, Bush, here's who you're going to recommend to your White House. Chase Bank said, hey, Obama, here's who you're going to recommend. And so they're the same people, same thing. Mm-hmm. And so what I loved about Trump and what I still love about anybody that will do this is breaking the system to where, oh, this person's not owned by a corporation. This person's not owned by interest groups. Like there was nothing better to see Kim Jong-un do what his father has done, which is like, hey, I'm going to kill all my people if you don't send us money and aid. And Trump's like, I'll kill them for you. And he was like,
okay,
never mind.
I was joking. Just, no, sorry.
Because he's like, all right, this guy's crazy. I can't push this guy around.
Okay, I won't disagree that he disrupted the system. But I would like to say that there's another representative for the Republican Party that you can put in place that is just as innovative, but in a less destructive way. Because what happened with the adoption of my beliefs, or the way I'm going to, I believe that wearing a mask is infringing on my human rights. Okay, well that's cool, but that's not the way it is, and I don't care how much you want to take and argue that there is some credibility in washing your hands and wearing a mask. It's scientifically proven. You may not agree with it, but somebody who has more centrist, that knows the system, knows how it's working, and says, I'm not going to take and play by those games anymore, and has the wherewithal and staying power that they don't get assassinated. I mean, is America going to put up with somebody like that? I mean, regardless of what side you put in there, if they tell the oil corporations or whoever's paying them, the banks, that I'm not going to play like that anymore. There's a lot of people who are going, well, we'll just make you disappear, dude, and put another guy in your place that will play what we want to. So that's the cynic in me that I'm hoping that I'm.
Ultimately, we have to get away from crony capitalism. That's the key. We have to make it where when you win a contract by the government, it has nothing to do with the person you knew there. We had nothing to do that if I donate $2 million to your campaign, I don't just suddenly win this contract to start when you suddenly attack Iraq and start a war to buy my tanks so I can make a bunch of money, right? We just that's ultimately, and I think that's where most people lie. And this is why I keep telling people is like, you're letting the media control your happiness. You're letting them control your emotions. Therefore, they're controlling you.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%.
And
so how do we take an unplug from that?
It's education.
Do we go all Amish and just close my laptop?
Education. Education's the answer.
And then finding the resources that are going to take and give you the actual facts,
It's
actual
a job for a
information.
great entrepreneur.
Okay, you heard it first. There's the job opportunities here, enormous. You just solve those problems, and man, we're good.
Man, I'll tell you one that I'm actually I'd be very interested in if I didn't, so ultimately I'm trying to run for president. That's the end goal for me.
Okay.
And
okay, when you do, and I show up on the White House, and I go, Nathan, remember me? And you go, Secret Service, get rid of that man. Make him go away.
well, you probably won't get that far.
I won't.
It'll probably be somebody have to call you ahead of time
Dude,
and escort
I did
you
that
in.
drawing of the White House for you. Don't remember? Wow.
So ultimately, that's the end goal for me.
Okay.
And so sometimes I have ideas of things I want to explore, but I know how they're going to be twisted by the time I'm president. And I think I can't do that.
Am I your apostle? I'm your new voice.
So-
I met Nathan before, and I'm telling you what, that guy's got some crazy good ideas.
So one of the good things is like I've been looking into vaccines because we're about to have our first child, and it's just alt left and alt right. That's all it is. No vats, alt vats.
Right.
And so I'm having to go vaccine by vaccine and do research. And one that I find, and so I'm like, man, I would love to put out this educational resource on what I've learned through this. But the thing is I don't want to come out as Nathan was an anti-vaxxer when he was 27. Here's him on a podcast.
Right.
Here's the website, everything he launched around that. And so sometimes you got to think about like how media spins, and then you have to think about, well, when do I have the influence to where I can educate?
You have the right to have an opinion, but people are owed the background of why you have that opinion. So you can have vaccines are great. I think everybody should have a vaccine. And it's going to be countered by somebody who says, no, I think vaccines are terrible. Nobody should have a vaccine. If you don't explain where you're coming from and you don't get closer to the middle and saying there are some advantages of vaccines that are medically proven. However, the same vaccine that we're talking about that keeps us safe for coronavirus has resulted in 6,000 deaths. They're weird. I mean, they're crazy. And you got to weigh the quotient of, is it better to get COVID or is it better to take the risk? Am I in a high risk factor? Understanding where you come up with your position is as important to me as the position itself. In fact, more important, because I need to know the information of how you got there.
Yeah.
I don't need to know the place that you are now. I'd like to know, when did you decide that you wanted to become president? How did you get there, and what makes you qualified? If you're doing all the homework and that's based on not, hey, I'm popular and I did this podcast and I got a whole bunch of likes. I went from 2,811 subscribers to 20 million. I should be president. But Matthew McConaughey as being the governor of Texas, I think is a batshit crazy idea. But I don't know if he's less batshit than the guy that's in there already.
I love Abbott. I think he's doing a great job.
You do?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have a discussion.
I don't know much about him, but I really loved his border security initiative he just pushed forward.
Okay, at the expense of it's a balancing act, and so my liberal come from is, okay, you're going to build a wall, you're going to shut things down. That's really not a whole lot different than what was happening before. It's all understanding the dynamics of how many people are coming in. And how many people are coming in, and we're saying, okay, it's okay for you to come in because it's good for our economy. You're going to come in and do these things that we need, and then you're going to go away. Understanding the whole balance of that is as important, if not more important, than I'm going to build a wall and I'm going to keep all these people out, or I'm going to completely open the borders and let everybody.
Yeah, so it's not. See, everybody always focuses on letting people in or keeping people out. And I always focus on the actual issue that we're trying to solve. So what we're trying to solve is somebody getting murdered by somebody that wasn't in here legally. What we're trying to fix is the person that spent 10 years and $20,000 trying to become a U.S. citizen for somebody just to walk over.
Right.
We're trying to make that guy's effort matter.
Yes.
And we're trying to make where your daughter didn't have to get raped and killed because of our lack of security.
Okay.
And so in the same way we install metal detectors when you walk into a courthouse, that's how I picture, I look at it as just hey, we are a country, we have rules, we must enforce them.
I agree. I mean, you go to Europe and you have to show a passport when you're crossing and they don't mess around with it. You don't show the right papers. You don't have the okay. You don't come in. But we've established a system in America that everybody has freedoms. You can be able to come and go however you want. We've put in place mechanisms that get in our own way. So I agree with you 100% that you can't just open the borders and anybody who wants to go in for whatever reason they want to go in. They're either trying to avoid having their kids included into gang stuff, bad people coming in, good people coming in. We're more interested in the good people who are going to contribute than the bad people coming in. But the bad people are going to take and exploit the system as much as the good people trying to escape it. And how do you take and manage that without just doing we're going to take in, nobody comes in, nobody goes out, or everybody comes in, everybody goes out. I get back to the agricultural system out in California. And the number of people that are brought in over the border or live in America undocumented that are working in the system, they've been here for years, it's enormous. How do you take and make it an incentive for if you want to take and work in America and you want to take and be represented and have the rights of Americans? Here's a system that allows that to happen without it being an 11-year process.
Well, I think the first thing is you have to have, again, removing crony capitalism. So I go with everything, but essentially you go to the supplier and go, hey, we've decided we're not going to allow you just to pay off and break the rules anymore.
Okay.
You already have existing employees here. You pay them X amount. That's how this is going to work. And they're all going to go through background checks and everything else. And we're going to work on a path to citizenship. And then you're going to start a scholarship fund where you're going to support those coming over so you always have future workforce, right? And so you essentially say, these are the rules you can play by because you're already here and you've already broken them.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate then.
It's the worst way to have it, but it transitions it.
It's a good transition. So how do you avoid the lettuce growers association saying, well, we can't do business like that. I can't pay people a living wage and still process so you can buy a head of lettuce at 13 cents a pound. I mean, the mechanisms, all of the industry that we let go is now relying on people who have to take the jobs because they don't have any other option.
So the lettuce price is going to increase. And then it's worth it for us to be an independent nation that doesn't need China and doesn't need other countries to have supplies from.
Or is it reasonable to recognize that we are now in a global society and there are certain disadvantages as well as advantages to working with these countries that have larger or lesser capacities than we do? So let me give you an example of we're going to be able to produce a certain limited amount of petrochemicals. Eventually they're going to run out. Some places are going to run out earlier than others. When that's going to happen, who knows? It could be centuries. It could be who knows? But how to transition everybody globally to a system that is better for the planet, but also reasonable in terms of reality. You're not going to you can't say no more petrochemicals, because there's so much that's dependent on it. Plastics, everything, pharmaceuticals, everything is built on a fossil fuel backbone. And if you say no more of that, well, you can't do that. So you have to figure out how to take and maneuver these things so that the people who are making money by it are still making money. And that's the biggest challenge I see is America's built on capitalism. So although the initiatives that you propose are great humanitarian things and they give back to this, but you're going to run into your brick walls of, well, gee, that means it's going to cost us more to do what we're doing. It's not going to be as profitable for me. How do you get past that?
Yeah, because my thing is I'm not changing profitability. I'm changing the price of lettuce, which means you sell it for more and they buy it for more, or they stop buying it, and then you have a smaller lettuce company, which is a tough thing, but it's better for our country.
So how do you argue the person who goes to Walmart and they like buying their lettuce for 13 cents a head, although it's harvested in Wuhan, and they put it on a ship and they bring it over here, And what I mean it's going to cost now, I'm going to pay 50 cents for a pound of lettuce. I don't want to do that.
No, you're to grow your own. Of course.
I will grow my own.
That's what we're going to do.
Not in Texas, though.
Silly? No, of course I'm not going to make you buy this expensive lettuce. It's a free country, and you can't afford it anymore, so you got to grow it yourself. And thankfully, because of hydroponics that exist in your home, you can just buy this little pod, pop it in, you'll have lettuce in 2 weeks.
Redoing.
The market is changing because good entrepreneurs are making it better.
That's good. I'm hoping they pave that path.
I just bought one, so
hydroponics,
a little like pod thing.
Oh yeah.
I don't know when it gets here, but it's got like different color lights. And,
yeah. And you're gonna grow one tomato plant.
I think grow 5 actually.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. Well, you'll be like me. When you grow one, you'll realize if it's a healthy tomato plant, I can't eat all those tomatoes. So at one time I had 15 tomato plants just because it was, and I was doing a hybrid root feeding system that I didn't invent, but it's kind of like a hybrid hydroponic thing. And they produced a lot of tomatoes. And then I said, why am I growing 15? Simply because I can? Because I can't eat that many tomatoes.
Yeah, this is just a little one, which is what's really intriguing about it. It's just, it's a Kickstarter thing.
Yeah. Well, if you can convince America that in not a whole bunch of real estate, you can grow enough food to feed a family of 4. I mean, after World War II, everybody was encouraged, actually during World War II, to grow your own garden, and it was tremendous because people who had little backyards, they could in a 4x4, you can grow. If you were in an area that you could, Texas is really hard. Texas is hard to grow anything besides cockroaches. Corn. You can?
My grandfather did.
Grew corn?
Yeah, he was in Mount Pleasant.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Because I worked for a whiskey distiller, and they
he grew potatoes, golden potatoes, which are my favorite. I chop them thin, put olive oil on them, bake them at 450.
Nice. A little salt,
yeah.
A little garlic.
Pink Himalayan.
Yeah.
I want to skip ahead.
Okay.
Tell me what the next 10 years looks like.
For me?
Like 10 years from now.
Or the world.
You're 75 years old. Are you still painting?
I'm 60. Oh, I am 75 years old. Okay, 10 years from now.
Do you ever stop? Do you ever retire? Do you start another thing? Like, all right, painting, that was one chapter, and I'm ready for another chapter that's growing these beauties.
I would like to live in Portugal and have a little villa with enough land that I can grow my own garden and start drinking the nectar of life on a much different basis. I mean, right now, I'm driven by my practice because I started my art practice way, way later than most people do. I mean, Blake, I don't know how Blake was, but he's like a young, cool dude. The guy who is out at UTA, the blind muralist guy. I mean, he's a little closer to my age, but usually artists start earlier. I started way late. So I'm sort of in the emerging artist category. Believe it or not, I just chose to do something that looked like I'm very practiced. Anyway, so I think I'd still like to be doing that, but not at a. Gee, I got to draw 4 saddles this year to pay the bills. And honestly, I made a prediction that I'd be probably. Last year during the pandemic was doing a lot of thinking about who we are and in our time here. And I said, I'm going to run my obituary on August 31st. And I would have been 76. I think I just chose it arbitrary 30 years from now. And no, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And I'm running my obituary for that day. My wife said, "Why would you do that? Why would you take and say that that's the day you're going to die?" And I said, "Well, if I take and set that as a date to do all the things that I want to do, I want to take and have my work shown have a museum approach me and say, we'd like to take and do a retrospective of your work. We think it's, remarkable or whatever. To live comfortably, to be healthy." I don't need to be mega wealthy. I mean, I just need enough to to be comfortable. And that's where I'd like to be. And I said, if I accomplish all that by the time this RIP day, then everything else is gravy. Everything else is, I can just relax and drink the nectar of life.
Do you think you could do Portugal now?
I think I could. I think I have there's a friend of mine who used to be, he had a boutique ad business in Dallas. We actually met one summer when I came back between living in New York and coming back to train and getting ready to go to Cleveland to play for the Browns. His name's Ed Stafford, and he owned a boutique ad business and he did really well with it. I think Frito-Lay and some others were kind of his really big clients. And he and his wife, Leah, lived over in Oak Cliff area, somewhere. They had a really nice house and stuff. And anyway, they cashed out. He's older than that. He's 75 now. And they cashed out, and he sold his business and sold their house, and they bought like under the Tuscan sun kind of place. It was run down, and properties in Portugal are reasonably inexpensive if you want to take and put the work in to bring it back up. And so he's probably got an acre, 2 acres. It's, he's got grapevines, and he's growing his own food, and they take walks and they send stuff on Facebook, and he's like, damn it, Ed, stop it. Just stop it. He said, you can come be my neighbor. And I'm like, I'm really thinking that the next 4 years might push me over that edge. And we've got family responsibilities here. My wife's got a mom that's 91 that lives in Dallas, and my mom's still 87. So, we have anchors here that keep us here. But both of us, my wife's world traveled. And she says, as long as when my family commitments here are done, I'm willing to go anywhere. So we could very likely be somewhere else. I'm an Air Force brat, so where my pillow is where home is. I have no connections to. I like Fort Worth's comfortable. Dallas is comfortable. Cheyenne, Wyoming is comfortable. Places that I lived were just kind of where I was, doing the things I was doing.
So do you have no kids?
I've got 2.
What do they do?
My daughter is she's an anesthesiologist with a cosmetic and dermatological company here in Dallas. Her fiance works with Parkland in the emergency unit. They're both, they live in Rockwall. And then
I was just there.
Were you?
Somebody rear-ended us, and my wife had to go there.
To Rockwall.
To Parkland.
Okay.
To Parkland Emergency.
Well, this is I really like this guy. He's big enough and he can kick my ass, and so I respect anybody that can do that. Anyway, so that's Devin and Jason and my son Cole. He lives in Boston and is working for Legal Seafoods. He's basically a bartender, and he's 33 now, and making good coin. Working as a GM and bartending and stuff. And so that's my lineage, at least the ones that I know about. I joke about that. I know where all my children are. Legitimate ones anyway. So I'm going to predict that your life is going to take on significant shifts in how when your son arrives. There are things that having kids teaches you that you didn't know you needed to learn. And I'm not going to say it's going to change your trajectory of wanting to be president of the United States. That may stay, but your reasons for being president of the United States may modify because when you recognize that our kids they come into the world at age 0, and we have this tremendous opportunity to take and create really good human beings from really raw stock. And there's certain things that happen universally, worldwide. There's a great program that was produced by Apple TV called The First 2,000 Days. And I recommend it. You watch it because it's following kids from birth to their fifth birthday, something like that, for the first 2,000 days, and how kids universally all develop the same things. Their speech patterns when they learn to walk, all in these sort of, no matter where you are and what culture you're in, they learn these things. It'd be a great clue to you of, do you know what your name?
Yeah, it's Zedekiah.
Zedekiah?
Yeah.
So Zedekiah, why is it, Zedekiah, should he be walking now? It's like, oh, some other kids are, our neighbors who have, two, the other is walking. It's like, it has nothing to do. It has an environment. It has all sorts of things that either are heretical and they're just going to take and do them when they're supposed to do them or they're ready to do them. And then there are things that are environmental. And, but I'm going to predict that that's going to be the biggest education that you could ever have imagined, is making a human being and then trying to figure out what to do with them when they're either behaving or misbehaving.
I know. I think about it all the time.
It's like, how could you create such bodily fluids in such a little body? It's either near or there. And
it's so funny because I've wanted a family my whole life. And so I've actually thought about this stuff for a really long time. So it's a pretty surreal moment to know that it's how close it is to happening.
Yeah. Are you going to be in for the delivery?
Yeah.
Okay. Highly recommend it. And even if my wife and my kids, we're no longer married. Funny delivery story. So she goes through, we go through Lamaze class and we do all this sorts of stuff, but I've never met her OBGYN, the baby doctor. And so she goes into labor and we're all prepped to take and deliver naturally. Right. And she's in labor for 11 hours and, hey, nothing's happened. I mean, she's in extreme distress. And so finally her doctor comes in and I'm sitting there holding her hand and she's crushing mine and going into contractions. And the doctor looks at me, she looks at her and she says, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm the husband." And he looks at her and she says, "Why didn't you tell me he was so big? Prep her for a C-section." And so she went right off to take and have a C-section done. So we had geared up for this natural, beautiful delivery process, and it was usurped because I'm, bigger than the average bear. And the doctor crudely say, "He's not coming out the same way he went in." And so we go into the operating room, and that's trippy because they've got her all draped off, and they do an epidural. So her upper body is like awake, and her lower body is, it's like off in another universe. And the doctors they have body parts set over, because they have to basically move everything out of the way so they can get the baby out. So if you can avoid that, if you have an aversion to
blood makes me faint, so I'm not well prepped for this.
Okay, so knowing that, I'm giving you the hint that if blood makes you faint, no matter how etheric that moment might be, you might want to we might want to bounce out of that one and say, "Honey, I'd like to do that." But then they're going to have me on a gurney next to you. Because it was fascinating in a really kind of CSI kind of way.
Ultimately, when you look back at your life, what are some of the key moments besides 9/11 and NFL, but key moments that shaped the outcome? I understand the big moments, but the key little moments.
It was
what were the conversations that were had? What were the people that were in your life? Tell me about that.
Well, there's always key people. I had a great art instructor in high school that kind of let me. Her name was Betty Smith, and she recognized that I had some skills. And so she kind of let me do my thing, and she gave me permission to take and be creative, even if it didn't make sense. And I made some of my most innovative, different work with those precepts. And coaches were always influential. They taught you certain life skills, and I can look and list and do a litany of all the people who I can say, okay, this is what they added, and this is what they added. And it's like a color. It's like a palette, a color palette. And I have this analogy that I like to think is when we die, and wherever we go, and whoever we meet, takes and explains to us that our life is like a giant jigsaw puzzle, and the puzzle, we just don't have the picture of what is on the box, and we're putting all these pieces together, and we know they interlock, but we don't know what the picture is that we're going to create. And it's not until we die and we're turned around to look at that tapestry that we've created that we actually understand what all those pieces and parts go together with. And so I approach every day like that. I may not understand what this conversation, but it's now a puzzle piece. You're now part of my fabric, and I'm hoping that I'm part of yours. I mean, whether you remember me tomorrow or not, I don't know, but the way I try to approach each day now, and it happened to me, I think the most, other than being on the park bench and the old gentleman trying to share his peanut butter and apple jelly sandwich with me, was I was making the trip back from Massachusetts. I'd closed my shop. I was basically down to point zero, and was driving in the car and recognized that I have nothing to lose now. Anything that I do is building for tomorrow, and I have to take and relax on my grasp of I actually have control of anything. And it wasn't until that moment that and I picked up a book called I think it was Zen for Dummies, and it's all about had a great visual of we're nothing more than a leaf floating down a stream. We have no impact on the water that we've passed, and we have no influence on the water that we're going to approach. We just have to be in this moment and enjoy it for the moment that it is. And so each and every day, that was the moment that I recognized that I just have to take and realize and trust that the universe only knows how to say yes. So if I say, hey, I'd like to have this conversation with this guy named Nathan, and let's see how that works out. Or I need a new saddle commission when I come back from Paris, and the universe knows how to say yes. And I could never have put this conversation together if I tried to make it happen.
See, look at it another way. When I sell art, it's $100,000. The universe says, okay.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. And if I say I'm not worth $100,000, the universe says
okay.
Yes. Yeah. So if you adopt that idea, the universe is going to give you those answers. People say, well, that's very spiritual, and you're like, is it God you're talking to? And I say, God is a concept that is way, way beyond my mental capacities to try to explain or tell anybody how to take and believe in or not believe in.
So I'm a devout Christian, but I love the way Jordan Peterson puts this. I don't want to butcher this, and I don't feel like I have it perfectly, but it's something along the lines of,
paraphrase,
I live like he could exist, and even when I don't know if he does or something, it's something along the lines of, I live in reverence of a God that will pass judgment on my life. And I hope that I honor him with my life. It's a very interesting way of putting it.
Well, it's almost identical to
I'm going to find the exact quote.
Okay. The idea of a believing agnostic. I was raised Catholic. I'm a practicing Episcopalian, so Christianity is in my wheelhouse. I believe that other faith systems all have similar and approaches, I hope. But for me to try to explain it in my dogma is going to fall way short. So my approach is I want to stay off of God's naughty list. And if I do the things each and every day, I take it upon myself to make the right decisions that are morally and ethically correct. That I know that, if somebody was going to do this to me, I would go, okay.
So you know what I would do?
What?
I would see the reason if they're morally correct or incorrect is because God, and he created that within you.
Yes, and I agree. I think we're born knowing that, and we're born good. We create evil. And so for me to take and stay off of that evil list and to do all the things, when I get to heaven, if heaven is a place I'm going and I see St. Peter, I don't want to even be on his list. I want you to, who are you? I'm Marshall Harris. Well, you're not on my list. I said, I try to not be on your list because I know you've got a lot of stuff to do and a lot of people who are praying to you, give me this, give me that. I just wanted to take and manage my own system. And when I got here is be acceptable into the club. So whether that's heaven, whether that's the universe, I don't know. And we could have a whole nother discussion about theology. But anyway, I was an altar boy, and I see a lot of positives in faith systems. It gives us a reason to take and live and be good. But I also see a lot of negatives and face systems. It allows us to, you're not me, you're not part of my tribe.
See, the reason, you said something interesting, that we're essentially, that evil makes us bad or whatever, but we're not born bad.
We have a choice. I mean, that's the whole idea of
so
free
my
will.
thing is, of course, I believe we're all broken in need of a savior. And we're born sinners in need of a good God.
How is that possible, though? Okay. Go ahead, and then I won't interrupt anymore.
Well, you're welcome to. I just want to finish this point before it loses me. But essentially, we have free will, but we kind of have no will. Because if you've ever tried to make yourself stop doing something and not been able to, or you've ever said, I'm not going to do X, Y, Z, like there's some things I'm dead set on doing that I'm unable to make happen.
Yeah, but having experience in living a life of regret and worry, it's an active choice to focus on not regret or worry. It's wasted energy. It's baggage that we can't, if we're going to carry it through life.
I agree.
Okay. So for me to take and adopt the idea that I was born flawed, I don't buy that. I think we were born, and the moment we were born, we are environmentally as well as genetically wired to either, we know when things are good and we know when things are bad. If you have to ask yourself the question of, should I do this? Then the answer is already there of maybe not. And that's my personal approach to things.
If you had free self-will, then you would always, because sometimes we do things that we know are bad for us, and we do them anyway.
I don't. I do things that like I drink too much. I know that's bad for me, and I know the next morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to feel really shitty. And I try to do that less because I know the accountability for it is, this. I approach people like that. Try not to, if it's in my best interest, but it's not in the world's best interest or your best interest, then maybe it's not I could sell a painting for $100,000, but should I?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Selling a painting for $100,000 isn't going to,
it doesn't do anything other than just sets you up closer to what you want to do for your final years on Earth.
I probably shouldn't have made that. That was a bad comparison, trying to make a point. Anyway, the Catholics are raised to believe that we're guilty. Everything is our fault. And I think that a lot of things are our fault. But it's not.
But see, the story of the gospel is, but Jesus takes all that regret, all that stress, all of that away. And that is It's not yours to keep or hold on to because he died on a cross for it.
Right. But if I have the choice of not putting that on Jesus's to-do list, I'm going to choose that. If I have a choice of is this a good reason, a good idea, a bad idea? If it's a bad idea, then it's going to take thank you, Jesus, for dying on the cross for that. But I don't want that mind to be part of that weight. I'm hoping that my actions are going to take, like I said, I don't want to be on the God's good list or naughty list. I want to be on no list, and for me to show up and go, oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
The problem is that he had a plan for your life, and he knitted you together in your mother's womb, and that he knew everything that would ever happen.
Right.
If you choose A or B. And so no matter if that's what you want, that's not what God wants for you.
Yes, it's not what you want. It's the plan that is set out for you. I get in my own way when I think I have control of that. And so a great example of this is I was in Massachusetts, and I was working for a lumber company in a lumber yard. And I was pissed. And this is before I moved down here and sort of got all loopy. And I'm just angry as hell. I'm gripping the steering wheel of my car and I'm driving, just having this raging, why am I so angry? I'm not where I need to be. I hate my job. And I stop at a stop sign and I look over and there's this old man who's obviously had a stroke. And he's got a grocery bag over his arm, and he's smiling, and he's just wobbling along on the street. He's just wobbling along, and I look over that, and it's son of a bitch. That guy is in terrible shape. He's old. This is the condition he's in, and he is happy because he can walk to the grocery store and be self-sufficient and walk back home.
I heard the exact same story today. Almost.
And it was like, all right, thank you. Attitude adjustment.
There's this really successful entrepreneur building a huge house. Contractors behind, didn't show up, didn't call, whatever. He runs into the house just mad. And he goes, there's 10 guys there making $15 an hour, listening to music, smiling, doing great work. Mm-hmm. And I thought, how are the people working on the guy building the mansion's house happier than the guy building the mansion?
Right. Yeah, yeah. So I have to remind myself that
we create our own realities.
We do.
And that's what responsibility and ownership does for you. It says, cool, I control this.
I'm in control of the decisions that I make. As long as I'm making the best decision I can today, then I'm trusting in God's plan, the universe's plan, that plan will be revealed to me as I progress through life. It always has. I look back at all of the things that we've been talking about for the past 2.5, 3 hours. They're not my plan. I mean, I didn't put in place that the coach from my college team that we were terrible at was going to be the offensive coordinator at the team that I was going to wind up playing with. I didn't put that into place. That was just circumstantial, or it was part of God's plan. But it all rolled out, and as long as I stop bitching about the job that I have or what I don't have, then everything works out fine. I mean, I just have to trust in that.
Everything is good.
Everything is good. Our opinion of it sometimes is a little wonky.
It's really what it comes down to, because the thing is that, like, when something terrible happens, I always turn to my wife and I go, man, I'm so thankful for this.
Because it's a lesson.
Well, it's a lesson. It's a story. It broke down something in me. Mm-hmm. It helped, it's a breakthrough, which is of course part of the lesson. It's all these things, right?
Growth happens when growth is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we have to be smacked in the head by the 2x4 of reality.
But it's all about us walking into the situation saying, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
Like I woke up this morning and go, this podcast, I'm going to crush it.
Good.
He's going to be the best guest. His artwork's incredible. He's going to have a cool story. He's going to have a dope beard. He's going to be 7 foot tall. No, I didn't say that. But it's all about how you approach things. Yeah. So I wake up every day and I go, I love my country. I didn't serve in the military. And the next best thing I can do is run for president and give back to my country.
I'm looking forward to that plan.
Because that's what you do. Because politicians were never designed. Our founding fathers never had a thing where this is what you do for the rest of your life. They said, you serve your country, you do well for your country, and then as an act of service, you join the government.
Okay, so before we close, the idea of a career politician. So our founding fathers based the whole rule of things, if you're going to become a representative, you do your representing, and then you're out of office and you become a real person again. And when that went away, the influence of what I'm going to be after I'm a senator became an influence of what you are as a senator. So as president of the United States, all the fringe benefits and stuff that goes along with you, the power and the accolades and all of those sorts of things, how are you going to take and manage those sorts of things? Because the president that you're proposing that you're going to be is going to be different than any other president that's ever been a leader of this country. You're going to have components and facets of the best parts of leadership. How are we going to take and not absorb the other stuff?
3 words.
Entrepreneurship? No, that's 1 word.
I don't matter.
That's a great quote. That's a great quote. I think that's probably one of the best approaches to public service. You don't matter.
Yeah.
But what you do.
I work for the people. They elected me.
Yeah. That's a great approach.
And I'm honored by it. And it's a great way for me to give back to my country.
Cool.
That I love. American exceptionalism. We're bringing it back. But at the same time, I had to understand that I don't matter. There's 360 million people on this earth. And though I matter in the eyes of God, and I matter to my family, and I matter to my community, at the end of the day, sometimes you have to do things like, sometimes you just have to do what is right you have to lead the country selflessly, which is not about me. Mm-hmm. And it might be about what the people elected me to do, and I might have to stand firm in that. Everything, there's always a counterbalance. Everything is a dichotomy. And you just have to walk into that knowing that.
Well, good. I'm glad you're approaching it with that clarity. And I wish you tremendous luck in maintaining that. I think it'd be a great step in reestablishing America's exceptionalism. There's a lot of work to do.
Hopefully it happens way before then.
Yeah.
I don't like the trajectory we're on.
No, I agree.
We just elected somebody who has dementia and pretend like he doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not a good trajectory. Like we hated a guy with an orange face so much that we elected somebody that had dementia.
Well, if we could have put together, I mean, on either side, again, we're getting into what's the worst of, I mean, well, I voted for the worst of the two evils. That's not a great option. Put together a really great person, either Republican or Democrat or independent or somebody, that has vision.
And I don't think that at the end of the day, I didn't think Trump was that bad of an option. Especially, I thought Democrats could put up somebody way better. I thought Trump, because of the whole political system, if you already won the 4, you're reelected, to run the next 4. I don't really like that system, but that's how that works, I guess. But I really thought, Democrats, it's all about, like, the only reason Hillary went up is because it was her time to go.
Right.
She was never liked by anybody. Nobody ever liked her.
Right.
People loved Bill. I mean, Bill could molest children. They'd still be like, "Oh, good Bill Clinton." I mean, well,
I don't
he's died with Epstein, so maybe
that's what I don't understand at all. But again, we're getting back into the
Marshall. Thanks for coming in.
Great being here. Thank you.